Chapter 1005 Arrival of Pursuing Enemies. Chapter 1005 Arrival of Pursuing Enemies. In reality, Ling Han wasn't delaying their journey because he was afraid of Jiangnan. A ship would depart from Tyrant Axe Harbor every 3 days, yet the sizes of these ships varied. For example, the ship this time was a large-sized ship that could hold more passengers. Moreover, it had the highest safety rating out of all the ships as it had a powerful elite at the Sun-Moon tier guarding it. However, Ling Han and Shui Yanyu had come to exterminate pirates, so the more powerful were the people on their ship, the less likely they were to be targeted by pirates. Thus, they naturally wouldn't choose to take such a ship. They had to wait for a small ship that was only guarded by a cultivator at the consummate level of the mountain river tier, as this would greatly increase their chances of being targeted by pirates. The ship in 3 days was still going to be a large ship. They had to wait for another 3 days after that for there to be a small ship. After learning of this, Ling Han and Shui Yanyu entered the Black Tower to cultivate. Shui Yanyu practiced her martial arts techniques, while Ling Han investigated the new pill recipes that he had obtained. Although there were only 4 recipes, the levels of the recipes ranged from level 1 divine pill up to level 4 divine pill. This gradual increase in difficulty was exactly what Ling Han wanted. Before now, Ling Han hadn't had a chance to investigate these pill recipes, as the two had been cultivating or on the road the entire time. He was the Alchemy Emperor, and he had even managed to refine a semi-divine pill while he was still in the small world. Right now, he was already very close to becoming a divine-grade alchemist. There are 2 things of utmost importance in alchemy. The first is the art of controlling flames, and the second is the intertwining of divine patterns that have been extracted from medicinal ingredients. However one looks at it, these 2 things both boil down to control and the application of one's divine sense. I've drunk reincarnation tea before, so my divine sense is naturally far stronger than that of ordinary cultivators at the medium extreme. In fact, it might even be on par with that of cultivators at the consummate level. Coupled with the tempering by the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, the strength of my divine sense is unparalleled among those at the same cultivation level as me. In other words, my condition right now is far, far better than others. In terms of pill refinement techniques, there's not much difference between divine level and ordinary level spiritual herbs. It's just that the peak temperature of the flames and method of intertwining the divine patterns far exceed those needed for heaven level spiritual herbs. Then, let me start now. Ling Han started to refine the heavenly chi pill. It was a level 1 divine pill that could increase the speed of origin power accumulation for cultivators at the mountain river tier. There were many pills that had the same effect, but the heavenly chi pill was definitely one of the best among them. However, all pills came with their drawbacks, and one couldn't eat pills as if they were candy. Thus, if one could only ingest 10 pills a month, pills that were more effective were naturally more desirable. Fail, fail, fail. It was a divine pill, after all, so Ling Han's cauldron continued to explode as if he had become an inexperienced alchemy student again. However, he wasn't disheartened, as he made clear improvements with each failure that he experienced. Disappointingly, however, Ling Han still hadn't managed to succeed when 6 days passed, and they needed to set sail. I can probably succeed after a dozen or so more attempts. Ling Han and Shui Yanyu exited the Black Tower and headed to the harbor. Not long after they arrived, others also started to arrive one after another. There were even some people with whom they were familiar. Jiangnan was naturally one of them. He had 10 underlings at the mountain river tier, and his eyes almost bulged out of their sockets as he leered at Shui Yanyu. "Those 3 are from the Luo clan," Shui Yanyu whispered in Ling Han's ears. "Luo Yu, Luo Wu, and Luo Sinyun." Luo Sinyun is an elite at the Sun-Moon tier, and he most likely advanced to this tier over 30,000 years ago. It's extremely likely that he's already reached the peak stage of the low extreme. Shui Yanyu glanced at another direction, and continued. "Those 2 over there was Shao and Fan Yong, the other 2 followers of Zhao Luan. They've been at the high extreme of the mountain river tier for a long time, so they've most likely reached the peak stage already." Ling Han nodded as he listened to Shui Yanyu. Meanwhile, He also noticed 4 sharply dressed females. Weren't they Lu Ying and the others, the 4 female guards of Sha Yuan? These 4 females couldn't be underestimated, as their cultivation levels were all at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Apart from these familiar faces, there was also a youth in coarse clothes who looked to be around 17 or 18 years old. However, he was evidently at the immortal level already, though it was hard to discern what specific tier and sub-minor level he was at. This youth had a fierce gaze that could instill fear in those he stared at. There was also a woman in a white dress who was as beautiful as a celestial maiden. Her skin was as white as jade, her lips were as red as dye, and her long hair was braided into a large plait that rested on her jade-like neck. She wore an aloof expression that made her appear like an unapproachable icy beauty. Nearby, there was also a youth who hugged his sword to his chest wherever he walked. It seemed as if he was unwilling to ever let go of the sword. The last person present was an ordinary man in gray clothes. He was the type of person who wouldn't attract a second glance if thrown into a crowd of people. Ling Han had the cloud-piercing shuttle, so he and Shui Yenyu had naturally arrived here the quickest. However, the Luo clan, Sha clan, and Zhao clan were all able to easily identify his final destination. Thus, they were also able to arrive here not long after Ling Han. "We're departing in 30 minutes," a sailor shouted. "If you want to board, then hurry up. Each person has to pay 10 true origin stones." The coarse-clothed youth was the first person to board. Following him, the woman in white and the sword-hugging youth also boarded. However, no one else followed after them. Ling Han couldn't help but smile. By the looks of it, the remaining people all had their eyes set on him. If he didn't board, the others naturally wouldn't board either. "Come on, then." He and Shui Yenyu walked onto the ship deck after paying 20 true origin stones. They stood near the bow of the ship. Immediately after they'd boarded, the people from the Luo clan, Sha clan, and Zhao clan all paid 10 true origin stones each and boarded the ship. "Halt! You're at the Sun Moon tier, so you're not allowed to board this ship." The sailor stopped Luo Sinyun from boarding the ship. "Why can't I board?" Luo Sinyun asked in displeasure. A mere cultivator at the mountain river tier actually dared to block him. He unleashed his aura, and instantly caused the sailor to tremble. "Humph! Sir, please go elsewhere if you want to show off your might. Don't forget, this is Tyrant Axe Harbor." An elder in an embroidered robe walked over like a spirit. There were a sun and moon hovering behind his back, and he said, "The rules of our Yang clan are simple. Small ships only accept passengers at the mountain river tier. This is to ensure everyone's safety and to prevent fellow passengers from targeting each other while out at sea." The guards on small ships were only at the consummate level of the mountain river tier, so how could they maintain the safety of all the passengers if an elite at the Sun Moon tier boarded? Luo Sinyun stared at the elder for a long time before humping in displeasure. He turned and whispered a few words to Luo Yu and Luo Wu before retreating back onto the harbor. A powerful dragon couldn't defeat a snake in its nest one. Moreover, Luo Sinyun couldn't be considered a powerful dragon when compared to the Yang clan anyway. He didn't mask his killing intent as he stared at Ling Han intently. Even if he couldn't board the ship, Luo Yu and Luo Wu were both at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Luo Yu was more so at the peak stage of the consummate level already. He could definitely suppress Ling Han with a single hand. After 30 minutes, the ship raised its anchor and started to sail toward the boundless sea ahead. This ship was small, measuring only 30 meters in length and 15 or so meters in height. There was a total of 3 levels, with the uppermost level for passengers and the lowest level for sailors. The middle level was for storing weapons, and it also housed the cannons of the ship. These cannons were powered by true origin stones and could unleash devastating attacks. However, these cannons were normally never used, as they consumed 1 or more true origin stones with each shot that they fired. The price of using them was far too high. The fuel for the ship was also true origin stones, and there was a formation set up inside the ship. When they couldn't rely on the wind, they could use true origin stones to activate the formation and power the ship. When the ship disappeared from the harbor, many pairs of eyes were already fixed on Ling Han's body. Chapter 1006 Pill Refinement. Chapter 1006 Pill Refinement. Ha ha! Brat, you finally couldn't resist setting out to sea! Jiang Onion started to roar with laughter. In his eyes, that delicious and charming, seductive beauty would be his once Ling Han decided to set out to sea. Ling Han completely ignored him. After all, Jiang Onion was merely a clown. Seize him! Jiang Onion's displeasure turned to anger when he saw Ling Han's reaction. He was the young gang leader of the Black Five gang. Impudence! A burly man shouted. He was truly burly, and his height reached an astonishing 3 meters. His body bulged with jet-black muscles, and it looked as if he were forged from cold iron. The cold glint reflected by his skin was especially clear. Who are you? How dare you speak like that in front of me? Jiang Onion was extremely annoyed. Was his status as the young gang leader of the Black Five gang all for show? Why was everyone going against his wishes? Young gang leader. An elder hurriedly tugged at him, and whispered. This is the Yang clan's Yang Taiching, an elite at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. It's rumored that he practices a peculiar cultivation technique, causing his physique to become as strong as godly metal. He's extremely favored by the Yang clan. Jiang Onion's temper instantly died down. He was indeed the young gang leader of the Black Five gang, but how could the Black Five gang compare to the Yang clan? Don't even think about causing troubles on my ship! Yang Taiching swept his gaze over every single person on the ship. With his rich experience, how could he not notice that many of the passengers had set their eyes on the young man and woman? Once you disembark my ship, you can naturally settle all the differences between you. However, don't blame me for being rough if you try to cause troubles on my ship. Yang Taiching unleashed his powerful aura without reservation as he spoke. Brother Yang, is it? My hands are a little itchy, so why don't we have a short spar? Luo Yu stepped forward with a smile on his face. No problem, Yang Taiching answered without hesitation. If he didn't display his prowess, who knew what troubles these passengers would cause? Luo Yu took a few steps forward before pressing his hand toward Yang Taiching. Pun! 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 Yang Taiching also moved, and both of them used speed to fight speed. They exchanged over 10 blows in a fraction of a second. Luo Yu suddenly gave a muffled groan as he retreated several steps. His face had already become frighteningly pale. Good fight, Yang Taiching said calmly as he cupped his fists. Luo Yu finally came to his senses after a short while, and hoarsely said, Brother Yang is indeed strong. I'm not your opponent. It was especially evident how powerful Yang Taiching was after he exchanged a few strikes with Luo Yu. The people on the ship were all astonished, and no one dared to underestimate his power anymore. Initially, the members of the Luo clan had all felt superior as they had come from the imperial capital. They despised the local residents of this poor and rural area. However, Yang Taiching's strength gave them a huge slap across the face. This person is most likely a 2-star genius. His cultivation level is at the peak stage of the consummate level, and he's also a 2-star genius. He's probably the most powerful person on this ship. It looks like we won't be able to kill Ling Han on this ship. We'll wait. Their expressions didn't change as they spoke, and they all wore radiant smiles as they reached a decision. I'll repeat myself again, Yang Taiching said in a threatening voice. No matter who you are, don't even think about targeting other passengers on my ship. If you dare to kill someone, I'll also dare to kill you. Humph! Everyone remained silent, and only Jiang Onion wore his displeasure on his face. From this, it could be seen just how foolish this young gang leader was. He had already reached the mountain river tier, yet he still didn't have any astuteness at all. He was already accustomed to acting as he pleased, so he was naturally extremely unhappy now that someone was suppressing him. Yang Taiching entered his cabin to rest after delivering his warning. This was going to be a very, very long trip. Their ship would sail on a set route. It would anchor in a few renowned regions. During this journey they would stop for 1 to 3 days at each place, and then set off for the next region. So, what exactly were those renowned regions? These were areas where treasures could potentially be found. When that star had crashed down, it had broken into several pieces. There were 7 extremely large pieces, and they had each landed in a different region in the sea. Thus, people would normally venture to these 7 regions when searching for treasures. Ling Han gazed at the scenery for a while. An astonishing gravity field enveloped the entire star sea, and if cultivators tried to swim here, they would exhaust themselves and drown in no time. Of course, they could still recover their origin power when they reached the bottom, so they still had a chance to swim back up. However, a plethora of terrifying demonic beasts that were already accustomed to the crushing gravity field lurked under the sea. Moreover, this was the sea, after all, so it would be extremely dangerous if one were to come across a demonic beast that was at the same cultivation level as them. If the demonic beast's cultivation level was higher, then one was pretty much as good as dead. When battling under the sea's surface, the battle prowess of humans would decrease dramatically. Ling Han hadn't come to search for treasures, so he naturally wasn't worried about such dangers. After gazing at the scenery for a while, he returned to his cabin and continued to refine pills. Wasting time was a disgraceful habit. The ship continued along its route, but apart from a measly few people, no one else was interested in diving into the sea. They only had one target: Ling Han. After 7 days, Ling Han finally managed to refine his first batch of Heavenly Chi pills. The Heavenly Chi pill was mainly aimed at cultivators at the low extreme of the mountain river tier. Cultivators at the medium extreme could still ingest this pill, yet its effects would be much less evident. Ling Han gifted these pills to Shui Yanyu, and the seductive beauty was extremely astonished. Ling Han can actually refine pills as well? Moreover, he genuinely managed to refine divine pills. She had indeed seen Ling Han refining pills before. However, he had failed time and time again, so she had thought that he had only just set foot on his pill refinement journey. Who would have imagined that he was refining Heavenly Chi pills? In the imperial capital, such pills could be sold for 100 true origin stones each. Ling Han was only able to refine 3 pills the first time. However, he was able to refine 5 the second time, 7 the third time, and a perfect 10 the 10th time. In his eyes, this was extremely normal. As the Alchemy Emperor, he had only taken so long to refine this pill because he had been lacking in resources and cultivation level. Now that he had resolved these issues, it was naturally easy for him to succeed in his pill refinement. However, Shui Yanyu was given quite a large fright. Was this man a monster? Not only did his cultivation level advance rapidly, but he was even tremendously talented in alchemy. In any case, she was still extremely happy about this, as the Heavenly Chi pill was exactly what she needed right now. This pill could help her rapidly raise her cultivation level. After using all of the ingredients, Ling Han started to study the second pill recipe. Heavenly Pro Pill. It was a level 2 divine pill that could elevate both the origin power and physical power of a cultivator. It could even strengthen one's physique to a small degree. Many people practiced body arts in the immortal realm, yet very few could master such arts. One of the major problems was strengthening one's physique. Only a tiny number of people could elevate their physique to the immortal level, as this required far too many resources. As a result, the Heavenly Pearl pill was extremely expensive, with each pill having a cost of 300 true origin stones. Moreover, this pill was often out of stock. At Ling Han's current level, this pill was the most useful to him. He was extremely motivated, and so immediately started to drain his ingredients after familiarizing himself with the pill recipe. Chapter 1007: The Great Danger Hidden in the Fog. Chapter 1007: The Great Danger Hidden in the Fog. Every single alchemist was nurtured by copious amounts of wealth. The only difference was whether it was a larger or a smaller amount. In a mere 4 days' time, Ling Han had refined materials worth the astronomical amount of 2 million true origin stones. This sum was sufficient to make a force like the Luo clan feel extreme heartache, and it was all spent on a level 2 divine pill. If it was a level 3, level 4, or level 5, what then? Every time an alchemist's furnace exploded in the concoction process, It would really bring one to tears. Ling Han spent a total of 1 million true origin stones on alchemical materials, and only 100,000 was spent on the materials to concoct the heavenly chi pill. The other materials were for the concoction of the heavenly pearl pill. As for level 3 and level 4 divine pills, he was not going to consider it for the moment. "Everyone, please gather at the front deck." A voice suddenly rang through the whole ship. It was Yang Tietjing's voice. "What happened?" Shui Yenyu asked. Ling Han shook his head. "I don't know. Let's go out to take a look first." The couple walked out of their cabin. Jiang Anyan just so happened to walk out from the cabin next door as well. His face was completely black, and he used a ferocious gaze to sweep endlessly over Ling Han as if he had caught an adulterous couple red-handed. In his thoughts, what could a lone man and woman be up to in a room by themselves? It had to be *********. They arrived at the ship's prow, and could see that there were already a few people standing there. "We are about to enter into the zone of the black fog," Yang Taiching explained as he pointed ahead. "In the black fog, our divine sense and vision would be greatly affected. At most, we would only be able to see objects half a foot in front of us." He paused, and then continued, "That was why I gathered everyone here. I do not want any unpleasant things to happen." It was very obvious. Once they entered into the zone of the black fog, his divine sense could not possibly shroud the whole ship, and anything that happened would be out of his control. He was not ignorant of the state of mutual hostility among the passengers on this ship. If someone really died, he would definitely have to bear responsibility. Hence, everyone had to come out obediently, and stay there right under his nose. Then, he would not have to worry about any possible problems. Ling Han looked out into the distance, and could see an area of black fog roughly 3 miles ahead of them. It had a very wide range, and there was no way to circle around it. It had to be known that the ships that traveled in the sea all moved very, very slowly. If they really circled around it, the length of their journey would probably increase by more than half a day at the very least. This is a characteristic feature of the Star Sea. It would occasionally create black fog, but as for the reason why that is the case, no one knows to this day. Shui Yenyu murmured lowly next to him. "I am really quite interested now. I'd like to dive beneath it and take a look," Ling Han said with a smile, but then shook his head. "Why is this bunch of pirates so obedient? It has already been quite a few days, and there is still no activity from them." Shui Yenyu's slender brows wrinkled as well. Apparently, she was very unhappy. Others would be afraid of encountering pirates, but the two of them wanted nothing more but to encounter pirates. "I have to trouble everyone to all stand where you are obediently without moving when we pass through this black fog. Otherwise—" Yang Taichung clenched his fists, his eyes filled with threat. No one opened their mouths to speak, but their eyes were wandering in all directions. It was apparent that they all had their own plans. "Be careful!" Shui Yenyu was a little nervous. There was no shortage of elites in the high extreme of mountain river tier here, and there were also elites in the consummate level. Ling Han cracked a grin and said, "It's all right. Later, we'll enter into the Black Tower to talk about life, and who cares what trouble they create outside." Immediately, a ripple of emotion surged in Shui Yenyu's heart. This guy, the big pervert he was, liked to explore her body when they were talking about life. The ship was already getting closer and closer to that black-colored fog, and the atmosphere on board was suddenly becoming tenser as well. "Later, when we enter into the fog, you all kill that brat!" Jiang Anyan issued a command to his subordinates. "But young gang leader Yang Taiching is just on the sidelines," one of his subordinates protested weakly. "Humph, so what? The fog hampers our divine sense and sight, and as long as you move fast enough, who will know you were the ones who killed him?" Jiang Anyan asked. Then, he added, "You definitely must not injure that woman. Otherwise, I will toss you all into the sea to be buried next to her." "Yes, young gang leader." There were a total of 8 members from the Black 5 gang aboard the ship, and the remaining 7 could only obey his command obediently. Jiang Ji was busy cultivating, and was still hoping for Jiang Anyan to carry on the ancestral line. Thus, even if Jiang Ji knew about this, it was possible that he would be supportive of it. On the other side, Sui Xiao and Fan Yon were also whispering amongst themselves, discussing how they should make their move later. Meanwhile, the two people from the Luo clan were similarly not content with peace, their 4 eyes focused on Ling Han while boiling with killing intent. The beautiful faces of Lu Ying and the other death guards were ice cold, and danger was lying all around them. The eyes of that middle-aged man in gray, though, were flickering as his attention wandered in all directions. Meanwhile, the young man that hugged a sword, the youth in coarse cloth, and the woman in white stood next to Yang Taiching as if they, too, had sensed that there would be violent turbulence ahead. They did not want to be drawn into the storm. It was in this kind of atmosphere that the ships slowly moved into the fog. Immediately, everyone felt as if they had been blinded. Even if they had their eyes open, they could not see anything in front of them. Only when they placed their hands in front of their eyes could they barely see a vague outline. It was even worse for divine sense. The moment they stretched their divine sense out of their bodies, it would be swallowed up by something. It was rendered completely useless. Thankfully, their hearing was still there. Otherwise, if they lost their 3 basic senses sight, hearing, and divine sense at the same time, a considerable many would probably be driven mad. It was complete silence on the ship. However, the silence was only momentary. Pun 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 pun. Immediately, sounds of battle were heard, and there were violent waves of power surging out, yet they were completely incapable of moving the fog in this place. Thankfully, this ship was specially built, and could sustain that terrifying gravity. It was naturally incomparably sturdy as well. At least, mountain river tier cultivators would find it very difficult to damage this ship. Stop! Stop! Yang Taiching roared in anger continuously. He charged into the battle, and whomever he encountered, he would grab and toss out of the melee. Pun pun pun. They endlessly crashed into the pillars and ship's hold. The crew of the ship joined him, trying to stop the chaotic battle. However, this only caused the battle to become even more chaotic. In the fog, nobody could see clearly, and they could only move based on instinct. After about 30 minutes, a ray of light suddenly shone in, and the fog began to dissipate. The battle instantly ceased. When the long mist sky once again reappeared, everyone was obediently standing where they were as if they had all been civilized people just now, and none of them had moved from their initial places at all. But if one took a closer look, they would be able to realize that there were some who had had their faces punched, a bruise forming around their eyes. There were others whose hair was messed up, and some even had their clothes torn open, every one of them cutting very sorry figures indeed. Young gang leader! An exclamation of shock rang out. Everyone turned to look in the direction of the exclamation, and saw that Jiang Anyun was lying face up on the ground, a bloody hole in his chest. It pierced precisely through his heart, and Jiang Anyun had already lost all signs of life. His expression was one filled with shock, as if he had completely not imagined that he would be attacked in this manner, and it would even be a fatal strike. You! It must have been you! The elder from the Black 5 gang pointed at Ling Han, his face filled with murderous intent. Chapter 1008 Who is the Killer? Chapter 1008 Who is the Killer? Me? Ling Han smiled slightly. Previously, when they entered into the zone of fog, he had entered into the Black Tower with Shui Yanyu. What business of his was it that there had been a battle raging outside? However, he could not use it as evidence. He merely shook his head and said, "Killing him is not worth my time." When he said this, he, too, felt curious. The people here should be aiming for him, so why was Jiang Anyun the one who had been stabbed and killed? Looking at this wound, it was both thin and deep. Obviously, the attacker had struck ruthlessly. His attack was meant to be fatal. It was definitely a planned assassination, and not a spontaneous action. "Aside from you, who else could it be?" the old man exclaimed, his beard shaking in anger. Jiang Anyun was the sole son of Jiang Ji, and though his character was unbearable, he bore the heavy responsibility of continuing the ancestral line for the Jiang clan. And now, before he had even sown the seeds, he was dead. Jiang Yi would definitely fly into a thunderous rage. He was now busy cultivating in seclusion, so where would he find the time to ***** and have another son? That's right. He was your foe, and it was already known to all from the first day we boarded. If it was not you, who else would do such a thing? Luo Wu interrupted, a clear handprint on his face. Who knew who was the one who'd slapped him? Instantly, Yang Tietching's eyes swept over, killing intent brimming in their depth. In truth, Ling Han did not fear this man. If it was a battle, it was true that he was no match for him at present. However, with his incredible physique, he was absolutely confident he could survive. Even if worst came to worst, he still had the Black Tower, didn't he? If there was no absolute necessity, what need was there for him to fight someone completely unrelated to death and fall for the dastardly trap of another? He now understood what was going on. Though the murderer had killed Jiang Anyun, the former's motive was still him. It was to slander him, and make use of Yang Taiching and the Black Five gang to get rid of him. Ling Han looked completely calm, and said, I will repeat it one more time. It was not I who killed him. If I really wanted to kill him, it would definitely not end with stabbing him to death with a single strike. Instead, I'd beat his head to a pulp. Ha, so you admit that you have a motive now? Zhuo Xiao suddenly jumped up. Are you an idiot? Ling Han looked at him in disdain. Brother Yang, this person has an old grudge with Jiang Anyun. Furthermore, he has also admitted just now that he had the idea of killing the latter. Luo Yu said to Yang Taiching. Fan Yong, meanwhile, asked sarcastically. Ling Han, you said you are not the killer, but what proof do you have? That's right. If it wasn't you, show some proof. Luo Wu called out as well. On the issue of dealing with Ling Han, they were on the same side. Ling Han scoffed out coldly and said, You really are a bunch of idiots. Since you all accuse me of murder, then it should be you who should be producing the evidence, and not I. Otherwise, I can also say that you ate ***T when you were little. If not, show some proof. You spied on him bathing yesterday, so please show some evidence to prove your innocence. He pointed at them one by one, and accused each person of a nonsensical crime. Everyone knew that he was speaking nonsense, but Ling Han had clearly conveyed his meaning, and it was whoever made the accusation should produce evidence to support his claim. Otherwise, wouldn't others have to run about everywhere to prove their innocence just because you were opening your mouth and making an accusation? If they wanted to accuse Ling Han of being the killer, they would have to show proof. Otherwise, it was best that they spoke less crap. In that moment, everyone's expression was cold. Previously, the situation was completely chaotic, and their divine sense and sight was both jammed. In truth, no one knew who the killer was, but since someone had jumped out to accuse Ling Han of the crime, they naturally were happy to go with the flow. After all, killing Ling Han was their main purpose. Yang Tietching's thick brows wrinkled into a frown. The relations of the people on board were complicated, and he, too, could not confirm who the killer was. Hence, he said, I will naturally get to the bottom of this matter. I ask everyone to cooperate with me. As you like, everyone replied. They all stayed on the deck to cooperate with Yang Tietching's investigation. In truth, this murder was very hard to investigate. After all, everyone had a spatial spirit tool, and if they hid the murder weapon inside, who would be able to find it? To say the least, they could have directly thrown it into the sea. What, would you still steer the ship back into the fog to search for it? The investigation naturally came to a dead end. On the other hand, the names of the other few people were made known. The young man hugging a sword was Jin Zhihui, the old man in gray was called Zhou Gaoyang, and the youth in coarse robes was called Fu Tian. Finally, the beauty in white was named Yin Yuanxiang. Forget about the remaining 7 people from the Black Five gang. They were all trash, so who cared what their names were? Yang Taichun could feel a headache coming on. Now that someone had died on board, he would definitely have to bear responsibility. More importantly, there was not the slightest bit of clue who the killer was. It seemed like the person who had done the deed was an assassin. This sword strike was really too decisive and clean. An assassin! The others were also considering this issue. After all, it was naturally a good thing to be able to push the blame on Ling Han, but if there really was an assassin on board, all of them would be in danger. Who knew if the next person to fall would be them, so they could be used to fraying Ling Han? Of course, it was still possible that Ling Han was the one who had done it. It was precisely because the truth was shrouded in fog that everyone felt a sense of danger. They felt as if not one person could be trusted, like everybody next to them could possibly become a killer. Why don't we enter into the black fog once more? Ling Han suddenly suggested. Everyone was stunned. Have you gone mad? In the fog, sight and divine sense would both be greatly affected, and battle prowess would drop drastically. No one was willing to stay in that kind of environment. Perhaps the killer would still make use of the opportunity again, and we would be able to find him then, Ling Han continued. In any case, his target was the pirates, so he did not care about the change in the ship's course, nor did he care if there would be time wasted. I think that this is not a bad suggestion. Luo Yu spoke up first, his eyes focused on Ling Han, revealing a sinister killing intent. Previously, he was slightly surprised that he had not managed to find Ling Han, but this time, it would definitely not happen again. Yes. Lu Ying and the other three women also expressed their agreement. Fan Yong and Zhu Xiao exchanged a look, and then nodded slowly. Meanwhile, Jin Zhihui, Zhou Gaoyang, Fu Tian, and Yin Yuanxiang did not have an opinion. They neither agreed nor objected, looking completely like, "You can all go crazy on your own, and I will just take care of myself." Seeing that none of the guests objected to steering back into the black fog, young Taiching humphed, and said, "Fine, then we'll go back into the black fog." He was also feeling frustrated. Someone had actually dared to commit murder right in front of his eyes. He would definitely find this person at all costs. The ship slowly turned around, and steered towards the fog. No one spoke any further, just as if they were all preparing to make their move. Very soon, the fog enveloped them. The sun's light gradually disappeared, and it finally became complete darkness. It was in that one instant that banging sounds rang out. Battle had erupted. Endless grunts were heard. Someone bounced out and crashed into the ship's hold, and someone suffered a few punches and palm strikes, releasing pained grunts. Someone had even been slashed with a sword, his blood streaming, and the warm liquid covering the faces of others. So what if elites like them could not see? They had long since had a clear grasp of the environment on the ship's deck, and like a blind man that had lived in a house for a considerable number of years, they were very familiar with their surroundings. They all thought that they had clearly targeted Ling Han, and fought with wild abandon. Chapter 1009 Entering the Fog for the Third Time. Chapter 1009 Entering the Fog for the Third Time. "You're so mischievous," Shui Yenyu said with a sigh in the Black Tower. Luo Yu and Luo Wu were both pillars of the Luo clan, while Zhu Xiao, Fan Yong, and Lu Ying and the other three women were all cultivators who had lived for tens of thousands of years. However, all of them were wrapped around his little finger. He claimed that he wanted to catch the perpetrator's tail, when in fact, he simply wanted these people to fight among themselves. Meanwhile, he could spectate from the sidelines and enjoy their aimless struggle. "Do you like it?" Ling Han asked with a smile. It was a pity that the fog still obstructed his vision even though he had already entered the Black Tower. This disappointed him greatly. "No!" Shui Yenyu answered hurriedly. She was afraid that Ling Han would start to grope her again, which was something that she enjoyed yet disliked. Ling Han chuckled and said, "Don't they say that girls like bad boys?" "Twisted logic!" Shui Yenyu scolded. She definitely wouldn't be attracted to a bad man. Otherwise, how would her relationship with Zhao Lun have become so bad? "It's about time for us to exit," Ling Han said. He could already sense the sunshine starting to illuminate the ship again. "Xiao!" The two of them exited the Black Tower. However, thanks to the black fog, no one had discovered that they had disappeared and then reappeared again. The radiant sunshine shone upon the ship. As though they had returned to the world from a dark and sinister hell, everyone felt a slight sense of delight. It felt truly horrible to lose their vision and divine sense. Gasp! However, everyone was immediately stunned. There were 7 new corpses laid in a neat row on the deck. These corpses belonged to the last remaining members of the Black Five gang. Moreover, all of them had been killed in the same manner, with a fatal sword wound to the chest. Who was it? Everyone's gazes involuntarily turned to Ling Han. He was the one who had suggested entering the black fog again, so it was only normal for everyone to suspect him the most. Ling Han, what do you have to say this time? Luo Yu shouted immediately. There's naturally nothing to say to stupid fools like you. Ling Han smiled and said, My suggestion was quite good, wasn't it? The culprit has indeed acted again. However, none of you worked together. Otherwise, with the help of several elites at the consummate level of the mountain river tier, how could the perpetrator have committed such crimes and then escaped? Stop twisting the facts. The culprit is clearly you. Luo Wu jabbed his finger at Ling Han. Ling Han shook his head and said, Let's cut the bullsh*t, shall we? Everyone was clearly attacking me just then. What chance did I have to assassinate others? 7 others, mind you. Stop making unfounded claims, Fan Yong said calmly. Exactly, stop spewing bullcrap. Luo Yu immediately refuted Ling Han's claim as well. It would definitely be troublesome if news of him trying to assassinate a fellow student of the Scarlet Heaven Academy were to spread. Yang Taichung wore a deep frown as he listened to the others speak. He had naturally noticed that everyone was indeed attacking Ling Han during the commotion just then. If one were to say that Ling Han could still find the opportunity to kill 7 people under such relentless attacks, he definitely wouldn't believe them. On the other hand, however, Ling Han's actions were indeed the most suspicious. He was the one who had suggested entering the Black Fog again, and he was also the one who bad blood with the Black Five gang. Right now, all the evidence was pointing toward Ling Han's being the culprit. Luo Yu pointed at Ling Han and said, Why don't we enter the Black Fog again? But this time, we have to tie him up. Brilliant idea! Fan Yong immediately clapped his hands in agreement. Hee, Ling Han, haven't you been claiming innocence this entire time? Luo Wu said. Then don't resist now. If people are killed again, then your name will have been cleared. Ling Han sneered and said, Are you retarded? If the culprit doesn't kill anymore, won't I become their scapegoat? Also, all of you are staring at me with such hostile expressions. Do you think I dare to let you restrain myself and become your targets? Brother Yang, you're the owner of this ship. I'll leave the decision to you. Luo Yu passed the problem to Yang Taichung. Yang Taichung pondered for a moment and said, Ling Han, come over here. I'll ensure your safety. By saying this, it was clear that Yang Taichung had agreed to Luo Yu and the others' suggestion. They would restrain Ling Han, and then enter the Black Fog again. Ling Han hesitated for a brief moment, and then said, Fine. I trust Captain Yang. He nodded at Shi Yenyu, and both of them walked to Yang Taichung's side. Yang Taichung retrieved 2 sets of handcuffs and said, These handcuffs are forged from level 4 godly metal, and there are even 3 divine patterns engraved onto them. Once restrained, even cultivators at the consummate level of the mountain river tier won't be able to escape. Everyone nodded in understanding. These handcuffs were specifically made to restrain elites. While these 2 sets were forged from level 4 godly metal, there were also ones that were forged from level 6, 7, or 8 godly metal. Some of the high-level ones could even restrain elites at the Sun-Moon tier. Meanwhile, the 3 engraved divine patterns would suppress the power of cultivators. Once restrained, cultivators would become no different from cripples. He's dead this time, Luo Yu and the others said in their minds. They didn't give a toss whether Ling Han was the culprit or not. All they wanted to do was seize this opportunity to end Ling Han's life. Yang Taichung handcuffed Ling Han in front of everyone else, and said to him, Rest assured, I'll definitely protect you until my last breath. Ling Han didn't believe him for a second. Yang Taichung was indeed powerful, but the other people on this ship weren't weak either. Luo Yu, as well as Lu Ying and the other 3 females, were all at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. If the 5 of them targeted him together, how could Yang Taiching block them? As long as they could distract Yang Taiching for just a few seconds, the remaining people would naturally be able to easily kill Ling Han. Ling Han only agreed to their suggestion because he had the Black Tower. Lads, come over here and form a circle around these 2 people. Yang Taiching suddenly shouted. Don't move from your spot even if you're killed. Understood. The 20 or so sailors answered in unison. They immediately formed 2 barriers in front of Ling Han and Shui Yanyu. Humph! They're mere trash at the low extreme of the mountain river tier. What use will they be? Luo Yu and the others all sneered in their minds. The gulf between each cultivation level and the immortal level was extremely huge. Even a difference of 1 subminor level would give a crushing advantage to the cultivator with the higher level, let alone a difference of 2 or 3 subminor levels. Even the fabled 5-star geniuses would only be able to swallow down their grievances. The ship turned around to enter the black fog again. Everyone immediately fell silent. The ship slowly entered the fog, and when the last ray of sunshine disappeared, an intense battle instantly erupted again. Ding, ding, ding! Pun, pun, pun! Everyone unleashed their attacks without reserve, drowning the ship in flashes of swords and gushes of power. Yang Taiching bellowed loudly as he blocked those who were charging over. He was at the consummate level of the mountain river tier, and he had even more so reached the peak stage of this minor level. Unless he broke through to the sun-moon tier, there was already no room for him to grow stronger. With thousands of years of battle experience, his battle prowess had already become resilient and domineering. Right now, his fists were no weaker than godly metal of the same level. Moreover, he was a 2-star genius, so his battle prowess was truly extremely frightening. However, the problem was that too many people were attacking him right now, and none of them were aiming for him. Instead, all of them were trying to barge past his blockade. As a result, it became extremely hard for him to stop them. It was simply impossible to keep all of them back. Ah! The sailors started to wail and moan in agony as they collapsed to the deck. You dare! Yang Taiching flared up in rage, and his 3-meter-tall body started to radiate with a metallic black sheen. He was finally unleashing his full powers. Chapter 1010 Pirate Attack. Chapter 1010 Pirate Attack. The chaotic battle continued to rage as the ship slowly left the black fog again. When sunshine reappeared, the chaotic battle instantly came to a stop. A black glow danced around Yang Taiching's body, making him appear as if he were a demon god from hell. An overwhelming aura radiated from his body as he swept his gaze over the surroundings. The 2 barriers of sailors had already collapsed into a moaning heap of pain and agony. Fortunately, they were only injured, not killed. He breathed a small sigh of relief, yet killing intent instantly flashed across his face. 2 people were lying face up with blood gushing from their chests. Pools of blood had already formed under their bodies. The mysterious assassin had appeared again. It was evident that the assassin's target was Ling Han. After disposing of the 2 people who were in the way, they... Huh! Everyone was stupefied. Ling Han stood unscathed in the same spot as before. Shui Yanyu stood beside him, and both of them appeared incredibly calm. There wasn't the slightest hint that they had participated in the battle just then. This was absolutely mind-boggling. All of them were marked in some way or another due to the chaotic battle beforehand, yet the target of everyone's attacks, Ling Han, was somehow completely unharmed? Looking closely, the cuffs on Ling Han's hands and feet were still firmly locked into place. This left them at a loss for words. Ling Han smiled and said, Can you remove the cuffs now? These cuffs could only suppress their power, and were completely useless against their divine sense. Thus, they were naturally able to enter the Black Tower to enjoy the heated sounds of battle again. Yang Taiching removed Ling Han's cuffs, and his expression became livid as he turned to look at the 2 dead sailors. He remained silent for a long time. His eyes were filled with eerie killing intent as he swept his gaze over every single person, and he said slowly, Regardless of who the culprit is, I'll definitely weed them out and rip them to shreds. Apart from Ling Han, everyone else was a suspect. "Report!" shouted the sailor responsible for keeping a lookout on top of the mast. "Enemies spotted! Enemies spotted! There are pirates sailing over!" Pirates? Ling Han was slightly surprised. They hadn't come across pirates in the past few days, yet they actually encountered them at such a sensitive time. "Prepare for battle," Yang Taiching said coldly. He knew that the person who had killed his sailors was still on his ship, yet he was completely helpless as he didn't know who the culprit was. This made him extremely angry. Now that there was a pirate attack, he finally had somewhere to vent his anger. 12 small boats appeared before them. These boats were genuinely small, with each only being able to hold 5 people. The people on these boats were all rowing rapidly, causing their boats to shoot forward like arrows. There had been over 2 kilometers between them, yet this distance was quickly cut down to less than a kilometer. At such a short distance, they could already clearly see the sinister and cruel faces of the pirates. "Cannons!" Yang Taiching commanded. "Understood." Boom, boom, boom. The cannons fired, yet the pirates were evidently experienced at dealing with such scenarios. They didn't panic as their boats nimbly dodged the attacks from the cannons. It was almost impossible to dodge a shot that had been fired, as these cannons fired beams of light, not cannonballs. These destructive beams of light were formed by the complex formations that consumed true origin stones. However, the sailors needed to aim before firing a shot, yet the small boats traveled along random, zigzagging paths. As a result, they were able to completely avoid the cannon fire. "Prepare for close-quarters combat!" Yang Taiching was also unfazed as he continued to issue commands. "Ha ha 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 ha!" The pirates laughed uncannily as they leaped onto the ship one after another. This was a mental tactic used to frighten their opponents and make them lose morale. This trip was completely worth it. There are so many beautiful women. These are beautiful women at the mountain river tier. Each of them commands a high price. Hee, we'll play by the old rules. Kill all the men and take all the women. Okie dokie. 60 pirates boarded their ship in no time, and an all-out battle instantly erupted. Although they had engaged in numerous mysterious battles in the Black Fog before, and although many people had died, they had only had one common enemy back then, Ling Han. The 8 people from the Black 5 gang and the 2 sailors had merely been unfortunate victims. However, the situation was completely different right now. The pirates wouldn't talk about justice with them, and they would kill or kidnap the passengers regardless of what the latter did. In the pirates' eyes, women were wealth, and men were enemies. Die. Everyone knew that this was no time for infighting. Otherwise, they would all become corpses under the pirates' ruthless weapons. Although the beautiful women wouldn't be killed, it was very likely that their fate would be far worse than death. Ling Han drew his sword with a chuckle and said, "Wife, let's have a competition to see who can kill the most pirates." "Why not?" Shui Yanyu wasn't one to admit defeat, so she quickly accepted Ling Han's challenge. Ling Han laughed and said quietly, "If I win, let me embrace you when we sleep tonight. If you win, I'll let you embrace me when we sleep tonight." Damn pervert. Shui Yanyu chided, but didn't forget to slash her sword at the pirates as she spoke. A pirate rushed over with his saber and said, "You two are fairly lovey-dovey with each other, huh? However, this brat must die. Girl, don't worry, we'll all become your men in a while. We'll definitely feed you until you're full." Ling Han humphed, and unleashed his 7 kills subduing soul technique, immediately sending the pirate who threatened them into a daze. Shui Yanyu followed up with a deadly strike that pierced through the pirate's heart. In the next instant, the pirate's corpse had already been stored into Ling Han's spatial spirit tool. How could they prove that they had completed the mission if they had no corpses to show for it? Spatial spirit tools were widely available in the immortal realm, and it wouldn't be surprising if everyone had more than 10 such tools. The *TCH couple. Another pirate charged over. He was more powerful than the previous pirate, and his cultivation level had already reached the high extreme. Black light fluctuated as his saber slashed over with an ear-piercing screech that almost caused blood to flow out of one's ears. Ling Han unleashed his 7 kills subduing soul technique again, yet the pirate only faltered for a short moment. Shui Yunyu's attack missed its target as it was parried by the saber of the pirate. If Ling Han activated his Black Tower, he could naturally absorb the pirate with ease. However, it would definitely cause a commotion if someone were to suddenly disappear into thin air. Although everyone was engaged in intense battles, Ling Han knew that many people still had their eyes locked onto him. He humphed as he lashed out with both his sword and palm. The mysterious 3000 and earth overturning seal bore down toward his opponent at the same time. You're merely at the early stage of the medium extreme. You're not worthy of being my opponent. The pirate laughed loudly as he slashed his sword at Ling Han's waist. With the thought, Ling Han activated his divine patterns of gravity. The pirate let out an astonished groan as the saber in his hand suddenly became a dozen or so times heavier. He hurriedly tightened his grip as the saber started to slip from his hand, yet he couldn't prevent his strike from deviating off its target. The pirate was completely dumbstruck. What kind of secret technique is this? How is it so powerful? One had to realize that he was at the middle stage of the high extreme, which was more than one full minor level above Ling Han. He had a decisive advantage over Ling Han in terms of power, so how could he have been affected? As these thoughts flashed through the pirate's mind, Ling Han's sword and palm had already struck over again. Chapter 10:11 I'll kill you in 10 strikes. Chapter 10:11 I'll kill you in 10 strikes. You're seeking death, the pirate said with a cold chuckle. When cultivators fought, they were most afraid of engaging in close-quarter combat. This was especially so if one were battling against someone more powerful, or someone at the same cultivation level. If one were to charge into close-quarter combat against someone more powerful, they were naturally seeking death. Meanwhile, if they engaged in close-quarter combat against someone at the same cultivation level, they would face a constant threat of death. On the other hand, if one were much stronger than their opponent, engaging in close-quarter combat was definitely the fastest way to end the battle. This brat's cultivation level is far lower than mine. He's seeking death by charging toward me. He can't be a 5-star genius, right? Even if he is, his battle prowess will only be on the same level as me. The pirate quickly swung his saber toward Ling Han. He wanted to end this battle in the shortest time possible. I'll kill you in 10 strikes, Ling Han said with a smile. Pooh! The pirate almost spluttered in surprise. That was his line, okay? A mere cultivator at the early stage of the medium extreme was actually threatening to kill him in 10 strikes. Where did his courage come from? Brat, accept your death! Divine patterns materialized on his saber as it cut through the air even more quickly. It was as if the saber were awakening. This wasn't because his saber was a god tool. Rather, this change was brought about because his martial intent had enveloped his weapon as he battled against Ling Han. Right now, his saber was like an extension of his body. Thus, his saber couldn't be underestimated even though it didn't possess the might of a genuine god tool. 1. A black glow radiated from the saber blade as a dazzling and destructive ray of light blasted into the deck, carving a deep and menacing groove in it. Ling Han danced about and continued to harass his opponent with his divine patterns of gravity. Add to that his 7 kills subduing soul technique, and the pirate could barely unleash 50% of his true battle prowess. One didn't necessarily need to have a higher battle prowess to defeat their enemy. Weakening the enemy's battle prowess could also help one achieve victory. They exchanged blow after blow, and they had already exchanged 9 strikes in a mere few seconds. The pirate didn't dare underestimate Ling Han any longer. However, his opponent was also kidding if he wanted to dispose of him in 10 strikes. There's only 1 strike left. You're dreaming if you want to kill me. Ling Han ferociously charged over, and it appeared as if he wanted to sacrifice his life to kill the pirate. The pirate was startled by this. However, his surprise quickly transformed into a cold chuckle. He was confident that he could kill Ling Han first. Once Ling Han died, the gravity field that affected him would naturally disappear as well. At that time, he would recover his full battle prowess, so how would Ling Han's strike still be able to hurt him? How foolish! Do you think you're invincible just because you can hamper my battle prowess? He viciously swung his saber at Ling Han's head. It was a shame that no one from the imperial capital was here to witness this sight. Otherwise, they would all kindly urge him to definitely not underestimate Ling Han's physique. Doing so would merely be seeking death. Boom! His saber struck down, and sure enough, it hit Ling Han's head before Ling Han could reach him. However, what happened next was astounding. 1. The saber shuddered, and surprisingly rebounded off Ling Han's head. Pooh! The pirate's eyes almost bulged out of his head. The sight before him was far beyond his comprehension. Only now did he realize why Ling Han was so confident. His physique was simply inhumane. Not good, he shouted in his mind. However, it was already too late for him to retreat. He had initially planned on killing Ling Han, which would in turn greatly reduce the might of Ling Han's own attack. If he succeeded, he wouldn't face any danger at all. But now, a sharp pain stabbed at his chest, and power instantly drained from his body. The 10th strike! Ling Han's voice echoed next to his ear, yet it sounded as if he was extremely far away. He could barely comprehend what had happened before his consciousness slowly drifted into darkness. Ling Han pulled his sword back. Not a drop of blood stained its mirror-like blade. He placed the pirate's corpse into his spatial spirit tool. He then charged toward where Shui Yanyu was to help her deal with her opponents. After being together for so long, their cooperation was already extremely smooth. Ling Han used his 7 kills subduing soul technique to stun the enemies, while Shui Yanyu seized the opportunities to end their lives. As long as their opponents' cultivation levels were below the high extreme, they would be able to kill them in a single combination strike. However, there were 60 pirates, so they naturally caught the attention of many pirates after killing more than 10 of their companions. Xiao! Another powerful pirate who had an image of 4 mountain rivers behind his back charged over. Consummate level! Fortunately, the pirate had only just formed his 4th river. This river was evidently smaller than the others, so the pirate was most likely only at the late stage of the consummate level, not the peak stage. Even so, his strength was still far above Ling Han's and Shui Yanyu's. Ling Han was a full 10 sub-minor levels beneath him unless he was a 10-star genius. There was absolutely no way for him to bridge such a large gap in cultivation level. However, 5-star geniuses were already things of legends, so how could there be a 10-star genius? Humph! Die! The pirate was a baldy with a shiny head, and a string of beads lashed out from his hand as he attacked. Looking closely, however, those beads were actually human skulls. They were simply many times smaller than normal. Ling Han was certain that those skulls all belonged to humans. Moreover, their owners had at least reached the mountain river tier. They had only become so small because they had been tempered and refined by the pirate. The skulls lit up as they whipped over. Pooh! Unexpectedly, they spat out streaks of black air that transformed into numerous black swords that slashed at Ling Han. So fast! Ling Han barely had enough time to raise his arms in front of his face before the swords slashed over. Pooh! Pu! 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 The swords ripped through his clothes and flesh as they pierced into his body. Fortunately, none of Ling Han's godly bones was snapped, as they were extremely sturdy. The consummate level is the consummate level, after all. How frightening, Ling Han lamented in his mind, yet he didn't know that the baldy was actually even more astonished. He was a full 10 sub-minor levels above Ling Han, so his strike should have been able to easily kill him. However, it had only brought Ling Han some minor injuries. This was completely unfathomable. Humph! Ling Han activated his divine patterns of flame, causing the swords on his arms to instantly disintegrate into dust. He then activated his indestructible heaven scroll, instantly healing all of his wounds. A string of curses raced through the baldy's mind as he stared at Ling Han with a dumbfounded expression. This kind of physique, this kind of recovery ability. Unless one could insta-kill Ling Han, who would be able to outlast him? Holy **T! How can there be such a freak? The baldy took a deep breath. By the looks of it, he had to unleash his trump card to insta-kill Ling Han, or at least severely wound him. Otherwise, if Ling Han could easily recover, there would be simply no way to kill him. He clutched the string of beads and said, "My Buddha is compassionate. Help these beings cross the ocean of suffering." 1. A tremendous divine golden halo radiated from his body. He's clearly a murderous demon, yet he actually has such a majestic attack? The Baldy tossed the string of beads into the air and shouted, "Foolish peasant, let me free your soul." 1. The string of beads instantly expanded, each skull transforming back into their original size. Counting carefully, there were 360 skulls in total. Ancient Heaven Circulation Formation, activate. Boom! Streaks of black light shot out from the skulls and mercilessly slashed at Ling Han. Chapter 10:12 The Killer Appears. Chapter 10:12 The Killer Appears. Every human skull was spewing shadowy light as they shot out towards Ling Han. 360 streaks of light formed a mysterious formation, greatly boosting the power behind every attack. Meanwhile, after the Baldy delivered this attack, his face couldn't help but turn a few shades paler. It was apparent that this attack was very straining on him. Ling Han dared not take this attack head-on. It was one thing for his physique to be tough, but his opponent's cultivation level was superior to his by as many as 10 sub-minor levels. Even his body of diamond would be pierced through, and he would be severely wounded at the very least. Pun, he delivered a palm strike and sent Shui Yanyu to the sidelines, while he himself retreated in another direction. Buddha is merciful, and willing to pass redemption to all. The Baldy descended amidst golden light, his face wearing a twisted expression, without the slightest bit of mercy anywhere. Ling Han dodged endlessly, while the Baldy continued to pursue him. His abilities were far superior to Ling Han's, so naturally the more he chased, the closer he came. Those streaks of shadowy light descended in a violent surge, and looked like they were just about to catch up to Ling Han. Accompanied by a cold humph, a streak of dark light swept over. Pa 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 pa. All these streaks of black light were shattered. Yang Taiching, who was currently engaged in a fierce battle with 3 pirates, had still managed to spare a hand to dissolve the crisis that Ling Han was trapped in. Yet, with this action, he was immediately on the receiving end of the counterattacks from 3 elites of the pirates. A vivid dance of shadow and light wrapped completely around him, and no further sign of him could be seen. "You managed to dodge once, but will you be able to dodge the second attack?" The Baldy smirked coldly. However, he did not immediately wave his string of beads for a second attack. Instead, he merely brandished it and charged over. Obviously, that earlier attack was too straining, and he had yet to recover fully. The pressure on Ling Han naturally decreased greatly. He used the unique terrain on the ship to dodge and evade continuously as he continued to observe the proceedings of the battle. The battle looked incredibly fierce, but there was still a great number that did not use their full abilities. For example, Lu Ying and the other 3 women. They were obviously elites in the consummate level of Mountain River Tier, yet merely exhibited abilities on the level of the peak stage of the medium extreme, and were currently in a heated battle with a few minor characters. The 2 members of the Luo clan were the same as well. Their abilities were obviously powerful, yet they purposely pretended to be weak. Otherwise, with at least 5 elites of the consummate level of the Mountain River Tier on their side, they had an overwhelming advantage. Looks like their evil intentions have not died, Ling Han thought. These people were reserving their strength. It was obvious that they wanted to make use of the chaotic battle to deliver a fatal strike against him. At that moment, they would be able to push the blame onto the pirates, removing themselves from the matter entirely. After all, no one would want to have any relation with the crime of having killed a disciple of the Scarlet Heaven Academy. "I will deliver you to the heavenly paradise." The Baldy grinned in a twisted manner, the fingers of his right hand forming an orchid one. He smacked down lightly, and Hong, a real orchid flower, actually took form, and slammed down on Ling Han. Upon a closer look, the stem of the orchid flower was formed from divine patterns, and the light it was exuding further formed shadowy images of blossoms, possessing a kind of sacred aura. To think a murderous maniac would have an aura of holiness and sanctity circulating around him. This was very odd and extremely bizarre. Ling Han quickly dodged. Bang! The orchid smashed into the deck, actually smashing a hole right in it, demonstrating how terrifying this attack was. It had to be known that the ship itself was built from bones of a special demonic beast from the Star Sea, and was incredibly sturdy and tough. Ping! Ling Han was sent flying with the aftershock, and shot sideways. Just at this moment, an incredibly cold sword's light waved, piercing out towards Ling Han's chest. The attacker was shockingly Zhou Gaoyang, that ordinary-looking man in grey robes. But at this moment, his eyes were shining with the light of malice, his whole person bursting with a terrifying aura. The peak stage of the high extreme. He was an elite even stronger than that pirate from before. The sword strike approached, and it was the moment where Ling Han was falling down and his defenses were the weakest. Moreover, the tip of the sword was sinisterly cold. It was obviously a supreme weapon, and added with an installation of power from him, it was very possible that this stab would be able to pierce right through Ling Han's body. The point that he was targeting was precisely Ling Han's heart. This attack was meant to be fatal. The Baldy did not know that there were already hidden waves of turbulence on board this ship, and when he saw this scene, he couldn't help but feel it weird, but it was all right with him. In any case, their purpose was to kill all the men here. As for who delivered the killing strike, who cared? Zhou Gaoyang's face was serious and somber, both hands gripping onto the hilt of his sword. There were visible divine patterns flickering on his hands, which extended onto the blade of the sword, causing it to burst with an astonishing glorious light as well. He obviously was also very wary of Ling Han's physique. Hence, this attack had his full power in it, and he was determined to pierce right through Ling Han's body. Many shadows embodiment technique! Ling Han exclaimed in a low voice, and in the instant the sword's tip touched him, he had entered into the Black Tower. Zhou Guiyang's sword strike instantly missed its target. It should be known that he had used his maximum power in this sword strike, and as it missed its target, the endless power did not find any exit. Naturally, his figure lost control, and charged right ahead. Pooh! Quite coincidentally, this strike just happened to stab into the thigh of one of the pirates, causing him so much pain that he screamed loudly. He turned around to look who had attacked him. He felt this was unfathomable. He was presently in a heated battle with one of the crew members, so why had some random guy suddenly stabbed him? He had not expressed how innocent he was when a bang was heard. That crew member that he had been fighting grasped the chance, and struck with his hammer, crushing the head of that pirate into mush. Xiao Ling Han appeared once more. Naturally, he reappeared on the spot he had disappeared. N.E.? Zhou Gaoyang and the Baldy both exclaimed in surprise. The few people that had been paying attention to Ling Han were also no exception. Just now, had Ling Han suddenly disappeared? Many shadows embodiment technique? These people automatically digested the smoke bomb Ling Han had thrown out. That was because in comparison with a spatial god tool, they would be more willing to believe that it was an incredible movement technique. What a joke. How could an ant from a small world possibly obtain the treasure of an ultimate elite of Genesis tier? The word spatial god tool did not flash through their minds at all. This movement technique was very awesome. It should be known that Zhou Gaoyang's abilities were far superior to Ling Han's, and the timing that he had chosen to make his move was exceptional. But it was precisely because of this that his strike did not succeed. Was this ant from a small world really so hard to kill? Ling Han smirked coldly and asked, "So the mysterious killer is you?" Zhou Gaoyang was expressionless as he asked, "You suspected me for a long time? My departure from the imperial capital must be a good chance that could not be missed to you ghosts. How could there be no movement from the Dark Night Hall? I have long since guessed that the mysterious killer comes from the Dark Night Hall, and in my eyes you are the biggest suspect," Ling Han said. Those like Luo Yu, Luing, Zhuishao, and the others all had clear identities. Then, if the Dark Night Hall had really sent out an assassin, he would naturally be someone among Jin Zhihui, Zhou Gaoyang, Fu Tian, and Yin Yuanxiang. However, though Jin Zhihui was also a swordsman, his sword techniques were wide and bold. It even had a kind of blunt feeling to it, which was completely not conforming to the sneak attack and ambush style from before. Fu Tian was even less of a suspect. This youth was practically a wild beast. His fighting style was barbaric and wild. Every part of his body was a weapon in itself. He kept attacking with his elbows, knees, and head. He even opened his mouth to bite others, like he himself was a barbarian. Yin Yuanxiang's weapon was a whip, so she was better at defense than attack. With such a comparison, Zhou Gaoyang naturally had to be the assassin from the Dark Night Hall. At the same time, the possibility that he was also that mysterious killer from before was naturally extremely high. Though Ling Han had been engaged in furious battle with the Baldi all this while, he had also placed a considerable amount of attention on him. He knew that with how chaotic the battle was, the latter might sneak up on and ambush him like a poisonous snake. And Ling Han had indeed not guessed wrongly. Chapter 1013 Greater Danger Lies Behind. Chapter 1013 Greater Danger Lies Behind. Zhou Gaoyang slashed his sword and sneered. So what if you know? You're still going to die anyway. Ling Han shook his head and said, Brother, you definitely shouldn't have dragged innocent people into this matter. Oh, so you want to stand up for them? Terrifying divine light flashed from Zhou Gaoyang's sword as he relentlessly slashed at Ling Han. His strikes were especially simple, and all of them targeted Ling Han's vital points. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, I certainly don't have that much spare time. However, there's someone who's been itching to pulverize you for a long time. Zhou Gaoyang continued to attack as he asked. Oh? Who is it? Me! Yang Taiching walked over following a cold humph. An overwhelming aura radiated from his 3-meter-tall body, and his face was livid and full of killing intent. Goosebumps instantly formed on Zhou Gaoyang's skin as he felt a cold chill run down his spine and through his 4 limbs. He was an entire minor level weaker than Yang Taiching, and he was only an experienced assassin, not a prodigy who could fight above his cultivation level. On the other hand, Yang Taiching was a 2-star genius. In other words, there was a whopping difference of 6 sub-minor levels between them. There was no doubt that this would be a one-sided battle. Zhou Gaoyang wasn't Ling Han, and he didn't have a sturdy physique either. Against an elite like Yang Taiching, it was extremely likely that he would be killed in 10 strikes. Yang Taiching, die! The 3 powerful pirates also charged over. Yang Taiching simply blocked them with one hand as he continued to stare at Zhou Gaoyang coldly. Do you still have anything to say? Zhou Gaoyang remained silent. Then, he suddenly became one with his sword. Xiao! His body instantly soared through the air. He wasn't attacking Yang Taiching, nor was he trying to drag Ling Han down with him. Rather, he was attempting to leap into the sea. His aim was evidently to escape to the seabed. Although the gravity field here was terrifying, one would almost certainly sink if they entered the sea, and they would have to walk like normal people on the seabed after a good 8 or 10 years. One would definitely be able to walk back out of the sea. This was a better option than struggling against Yang Taiching and facing certain death. No? Trying to escape? Yang Taiching sneered as his other hand reached out and grabbed at Zhou Gaoyang. This strike exemplified the crushing power of a cultivator at the peak stage of the consummate level. As if it were a small mountain, his large black hand grew incredibly large. A dozen or so divine patterns that exuded a frightening aura pulsed on his hand. Boom! This hand was far too large, and it instantly cast a shadow over the entire ship, blocking Zhou Gaoyang's path of escape. Sky-soaring sword! Zhou Gaoyang exclaimed softly. His speed suddenly increased dramatically as he became one with his sword and hurtled toward the large hand. Pooh! As if it were raining drops of light, sword light exploded through the air. Ling Han activated his Eye of Truth, only to see that Zhou Gaoyang had managed to create a hole in the large hand. Xiao! Zhou Gaoyang dashed out, yet the sword light around him had already become extremely dim. It was evident that he had paid a heavy price to use this technique. Yang Taiching waved his large hand as he charged out in pursuit, and sneered. Do you think you can escape? Zhou Gaoyang screamed in agony as the large hand wrapped around him and crushed his bones. The difference in strength was extremely evident. There was a gulf of 6 sub-minor levels, and Zhou Gaoyang more so lacked the will to battle. His only thought was to escape, yet in the end, this made it even easier for Yang Taiching to capture him. Die! The 3 pirates attacked Yang Taiching relentlessly. Pun pun pun! Their attacks continued to rain down on him. Yang Taiching was only fighting them with one hand, so he was naturally unable to completely mitigate their attacks. As a result, he was struck by a few of them. However, his physique was also astonishingly strong, so he merely had some blood seeping from the corners of his mouth. He was battling against 3 elites at the same time, yet he was still able to capture another elite who was at the peak stage of the high extreme. His strength was truly astounding. Spare me! Zhou Gaoyang immediately begged. I swear I didn't kill them. It really wasn't me. Pooh! How would Yang Taiching believe him? He clenched his right hand, and Zhou Gaoyang instantly exploded into a cloud of blood. The large hand slowly dissipated as he humped and unclenched his fist. Pirates, let me send you all to hell today! His killing intent had been inflamed, and an overwhelming might exuded from his tall demon-like body. Kill! 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 The pirates weren't afraid of battle either. Kaka brat, it's only you and me again. Die! The Baldy started to attack Ling Han again. Ling Han replied with strikes of his own. As long as his opponent didn't unleash his most powerful move, Ling Han's sturdy physique would definitely be able to withstand all of his attacks. He would at most suffer some minor wounds, but these could be instantly healed by his indestructible Heaven's Scroll. In terms of battle prowess, he was only at 5 or 6 stars right now. In terms of resistance to attacks, however, he was definitely at a freakish 10 stars. It was truly unbelievable that even an elite at the consummate level wasn't able to kill him. Meanwhile, Ling Han felt that it was a pity that he couldn't help Shui Yanyu kill more pirates. I'll kill them myself, then. Ling Han continuously activated his 7 kills subduing soul technique, with even cultivators at the peak stage of the medium extreme being affected. After stunning his enemies, Ling Han would kill them with one punch and then store them into his spatial spirit tool. The Baldy roared in fury. He was chasing and attacking Ling Han, yet Ling Han still had the time and leisure to kill his fellow pirates. This was utterly humiliating. On the one hand, the weaker pirates were being wiped out. On the other hand, the sailors on the ship were also being massacred. This caused Yang Taiching to almost go crazy with rage. His 3-meter-tall body expanded again, transforming into a giant 6 meters tall. His clothes were torn into shreds, and only a pair of underpants covered his sensitive region. 9 pulsating circular symbols were visible on his body, and they raised his power by a significant margin. 9-symbol divine pattern! A few pirates exclaimed. This is the Yang clan's secret technique, and one has to sacrifice a certain amount of their lifespan in order to activate it. It can raise one's battle prowess by 1 star. Yang Taiching was already extremely strong. Now that his battle prowess had been elevated by 1 more star, there was definitely no one on the ship who could fight him head-on. After all, this was a secret technique that reduced one's lifespan. To living beings, what was more precious than their lifespan? All of you can die! Yang Taiching unleashed his fury at the pirates. Ling Han was also astonished by the sight before him. If he were to battle against Yang Taiching head-on, it was extremely likely that his internal organs would be punctured in under 10 exchanges. After 100 exchanges, even his godly bones faced the risk of being completely shattered. Yang Taiching was at the consummate level, after all, and his battle prowess had even more so reached 3 stars right now. The pirates were instantly put on their back foot after Yang Taiching activated his secret technique. Their situation was only worsened by the fact that Luing and the others were all starting to unleash their full battle prowess. However, in Ling Han's eyes, the most eye-catching person wasn't Luing the consummate level cultivator or Yang Taiching the giant. Instead, it was Fu Tian, the youth who only looked to be 16 or 17 years old. This person was an absolute beast. His cultivation level was only at the peak stage of the low extreme, yet his battle prowess was extremely powerful. He didn't use any weapons, and instead used his various body parts to spectacular effects. In fact, Ling Han had even seen him biting off the nose of his opponent. Chapter 1014 Catastrophe Caused by Demonic Snakes. Chapter 1014 Catastrophe Caused by Demonic Snakes. When cultivators fought, they usually used their hands or feet. Otherwise, they would use some sort of weapon. Only a very, very small minority would choose to practice peculiar techniques such as Iron Head and so on. However, apart from Hunyo in the past, perhaps this youth was the only other person who used his mouth as a weapon. Fu Tian's fighting style was almost a replica of Hunyo's. However, he was even more vicious, with his steel-like hands being able to easily rip through his opponent's defenses. He would tear their intestines out and crush their throat with his mouth. In fact, he would attack in whatever manner as long as it could kill the enemy. He truly took full advantage of all his body parts. This was, of course, a result of him training intensely. He had most likely experienced countless similar battles, and such attacks had perhaps already become a natural instinct to him. Once he started fighting, his body would naturally move according to these ingrained instincts. Where on earth did this youth come from? Retreat! Retreat! The pirates couldn't endure the attacks any longer. 60 of them had boarded this ship, yet only less than 20 of them still remained standing. They had undoubtedly suffered a heavy loss. Most importantly, they were still unable to capture this ship after losing so many companions. "None of you shall escape!" Yang Taiching humphed coldly. He unleashed his full battle prowess as he charged from one end of the ship to the other. He was determined not to let a single pirate escape. Pun! At this moment, the ship suddenly shuddered violently, and almost capsized. The people on the ship all stumbled and stopped their battles. What was going on? Not good! The expressions of Yang Taiching and a few pirates changed drastically as they peered into the distance. Judging by their shocked and terrified expressions, they had definitely come across grave danger. Ling Han activated his Eye of Truth and also peered into the distance. He saw hundreds of giant snakes swimming over, each measuring over 30 meters in length, and having a body as thick as a barrel. Green patterns adorned their bodies. "Green pattern demonic snakes!" a sailor yelped. It was a type of demonic beast unique to the Star Sea. They were descendants of the demonic snake, and were a type of social demonic beast. Each nest would have at least several hundred mature snakes at the mountain river tier. When coming across such demonic beasts, the only option for small-sized ships was to escape. Pun! The ship shuddered again, and it suddenly tilted to the left. It was already on the verge of capsizing. Humph! Yang Taiching leaped toward the right of the ship and heavily stomped down. The ship shuddered violently, and the momentum of the tilt was instantly halted. Then, the ship started to tilt the other way. At the same time, there was a gigantic snake ramming the ship from underneath, trying to capsize it. If the cultivators fell into the water, their battle prowess would definitely take a huge hit. After reaching the immortal level, these demonic beasts were as intelligent as humans, and could even shape-shift into human form. Thus, they naturally knew how to maximize their advantages. Ling Han looked around, only to find that they had already been encircled by the gigantic snakes. These snakes measured over 30 meters in length, and all of them were at the mountain river tier, though it was unclear what their specific cultivation level was. There were also some small snakes that measured only 3 meters in length, though these snakes lagged a long distance behind their gigantic brethren. Moreover, they were only at the shattering void or heaven tier. It was clear that they didn't have the right to participate in the battle. They could only come over to feast on the flesh of the cultivators after the gigantic snakes finished the fight. Spiritual meat was nutritious to cultivators, and on the flip side, the blood essence of cultivators was also nutritious to demonic beasts. This was especially the case with immortal-level cultivators, whose blood essence was extremely nutritious to demonic beasts at the shattering void tier. This nest of snakes had probably been attracted by the stench of blood in the sea. They were here to enjoy a hearty meal. The situation was extremely precarious. Pun! The ship continued to rock back and forth as the snake underneath the ship relentlessly tried to capsize them. Right now, none of them dared to fight among themselves anymore. They stood at the edges of the ship as they used their powers to maintain its balance. If the ship capsized, few of them would be able to survive. Pun! Pun pun! Pun pun pun! As if someone were beating gongs, the ship groaned and creaked as it shuddered violently. Damn it! These demonic snakes are trying to break the ship apart. Their expressions all changed drastically. If one were to dive into the sea right now, they would see over 10 snakes spitting pellets of water at the bottom of the ship. These pellets of water would explode upon hitting the bottom of the hull, causing it to rock intensely. Further below these snakes, there was a gigantic demonic snake that measured over 300 meters in length. The patterns on its body had a dim silver luster. This was the demonic snake king, and its cultivation level had already reached the peak stage of the mountain river tier. In fact, it even had a chance to break through to the sun-moon tier. Thus, the patterns on its body were also different from the other snakes. It was this snake that had been ramming the ship and trying to capsize it before. As if it were being lashed by a severe storm, the ship rocked back and forth vigorously. Those who were under the immortal level were all thrown off their feet and into the sea. Meanwhile, Ling Han and the others stood their ground firmly as if their feet were glued to the deck. They remained still no matter how hard the ship rocked or shuddered. However, their expressions were all especially solemn. They all knew that it was only a matter of time before the ship broke apart. We've already been stuck here for a long time. If we can hold on for 2 more days, the next ship will catch up to us. It's a large ship, and there's a great elite at the sun-moon tier guarding it. Yang Taiching tried to raise everyone's spirits. If there were a great elite at the sun-moon tier, they would be able to slay thousands or even tens of thousands of these snakes, much less a mere several hundred. The problem was, could they hold on for 2 more days? The ship is falling apart! Fu Tian suddenly shouted. However, there was no hint of apprehension on his face, only an unyielding fighting spirit. He was definitely a battle maniac. Crack! Sure enough, a loud snapping sound traveled out from the ship. Its keel had been shattered. They all looked at each other, yet the ship disintegrated with a deafening boom before they could even open their mouths to speak. The ship broke into dozens of pieces. Find a piece to stand on! Yang Taiching roared. Otherwise, you'll definitely die if you battle while not being able to float. He was the captain of the ship, so he had to take responsibility for the safety of his sailors and passengers. Everyone heeded his advice and found various pieces of the ship to stand on. The pirates also stopped fighting, the 20 or so of them moving to 3 separate pieces of the wreckage. As for the small ships that they had come on, these had already been obliterated by the demonic snakes. Boom! A gigantic snake surfaced from the sea and slammed its thick and powerful tail into a group of people who were standing on flotsam. Unfortunately, Ling Han was on this piece of wreckage. Fortunately, however, Yang Taiching was also on this piece of wreckage. Fuck off! He clenched his fist and swung it at the snake's tail. Pun! The snake's tail exploded into a cloud of blood, and the excruciating pain made it squirm about and send huge waves surging through the sea. As expected of Yang Taiching. So strong! Wife, come closer! Ling Han's left arm was wrapped around Shui Yenyu's slender waist as he held his sword in his right hand. Us 2 lovers might die here today, yet you still haven't told me that you love me yet. You're not going to let me die with such regret, are you? Shui Yenyu rolled her eyes at him. Ling Han was far too good at acting. He clearly had the Black Tower, so even if the others all died, the 2 of them would still be absolutely safe. Chapter 10-15 Demonic Snake King. Chapter 10-15 Demonic Snake King. The demonic snakes started to attack. Pun! 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 Their attacks varied greatly, with some snakes spitting water pellets and other snakes whipping their tails. There were also snakes that rammed the flotsam with their bodies. Anyhow, their goal was all the same, and that was to push Ling Han and the other survivors off the wreckage and into the sea. Once they fell into the sea, the demonic snakes would be able to transform them into food with ease. Now that it had come to this, none of the cultivators dared to hide their abilities anymore. Otherwise, they really would be seeking death. They all unleashed their full battle prowess. Although Ling Han didn't need to worry about his safety, it would still be extremely troublesome if he were to sink to the seabed and have to walk back to shore. Thus, he also unleashed his full strength, using his body like a bow and his origin power as arrows as he attacked the snakes in the distance. He didn't use the arrows that were forged from godly metal, yet he was still able to unleash a battle prowess of 5 stars. One had to realize that Ling Han's cultivation level had already reached the early stage of the medium extreme. After an elevation of 5 stars, his battle prowess was now on par with the middle stage of the medium extreme. As such, the demonic snakes with a cultivation level under the high extreme were all insta-killed by his arrows. This couldn't be helped. The annihilating dragon star arrow was too fast, and those weaker than Ling Han didn't have any chance of dodging it at all. Their only choice was to be insta-killed. Although cultivators were generally afraid of close-quarter combat, they would still only maintain a distance of around 7 or 8 meters when they fought. This distance could maximize their battle prowess. However, this distance was nothing compared to the annihilating dragon star arrow. As a result, no one could compare to Ling Han when it came to the efficiency of slaying enemies. When Yang Taichung saw this, he decided that he might as well only defend and not attack. He would ensure the safety of the wreckage they were on, while Ling Han would freely unleash his most powerful attacks. Shio, 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 shio. The arrows whizzed out one after another, causing huge damage and many deaths among the nest of snakes. Pun! The seas instantly parted as a gigantic demonic snake slithered out. The patterns on its body were surprisingly silver in color. Demonic Snake King! Yang Tieching's expression instantly became grim. Shwa! The demonic Snake King opened its jaws as it appeared and spat a large water pellet at Yang Taichung. This water pellet was no slower than Ling Han's annihilating dragon star arrow, and it arrived before Yang Tieching's body almost as soon as the demonic Snake King spat it out. Ha! Yang Taichung poured all of his power into his fist as he punched at the water pellet. Pun! His fist collided with the water pellet, yet the tremendous force sent him flying hundreds of meters back. Only then did he fall into the sea with a plop. Even the powerful Yang Taichung is no match for the demonic Snake King? Everyone was stunned by this sight. Were they all going to die here? Pun! A figure surfaced from the sea. This was none other than Yang Taichung, and his legs became a blur as he sprinted across the water surface. He was pushing himself to the extreme, and cold sweat was pouring down his face. The gravity field enveloping this sea was tremendously powerful, meaning that one would need to expend huge amounts of origin power if they wanted to resist its pull. Thus, Yang Taichung had paid a huge price even though he had only covered a short distance of a mere several hundred meters. There was nothing he could have done about this, either, as sinking to the bottom would have been as good as dying. Dozens of giant snakes instantly dashed toward Yang Taichung. However, he was a 3-star genius on top of being at the consummate level right now, so he was able to kill a snake with each punch that he threw. The air around him instantly became misty with blood. The demonic Snake King was enraged, and it immediately slithered back into the sea. When it resurfaced, it was already in front of Yang Tiechung's body. Its head was held high as it prepared to spit another water pellet. Go! Ling Han fired another arrow. However, not only did he locate the demonic Snake King's weak point with his Eye of Truth this time, but he even activated his divine patterns of flame to increase the might of the arrow. Even the demonic Snake King didn't dare face this attack head-on. Pa! The demonic Snake King swatted the origin power arrow aside with its tail, yet Yang Taichung had already seized the opportunity to escape from before it. He leaped through the air and landed on a wooden plank. Although this plank was small, it was enough to let him catch his breath. The wooden plank bobbed up and down in the sea. The demonic Snake King was furious, and it whipped its head around to glare at Ling Han with its lantern-sized eyes. A frosty aura radiated from its body. Apprehension gripped Ling Han's heart. The demonic Snake King was incredibly powerful, and it was probably infinitely close to reaching the Sun Moon tier. It was because of its overwhelming might that Ling Han felt a cold chill shoot through his body. Its attack was definitely going to be earth-shattering. It was this brat that attracted the attention of the demonic Snake King. Push him into the sea. Otherwise, we'll all be dragged down along with him. Luo Wu and Fan Yong were also on the same piece of wreckage, and right now, both of them were staring daggers at Ling Han. It was evident that the demonic Snake King had its eyes set on Ling Han. Under its powerful attack, the other people on the wreckage would also be affected. However, if they pushed Ling Han off, they would still be able to hold on to their dear life for a little while longer. As long as they lived, there was still hope that they could survive until the next large ship came. At that time, they would be freed from this precarious situation. Why don't you two jump off? Ling Han asked coldly. These two people were truly selfish to the extreme. They were already facing such an ordeal, yet the two of them still persisted in causing internal conflict. In your dreams! We'll send you on your way now! Luo Wu and Fan Yong reached out in unison. They had come here to kill Ling Han anyway, and they had only held back because they had been afraid of the others before. Now that their lives were in danger, what more did they care? Both of them were elites at the high extreme, so the might of their attacks was naturally astonishing. Ling Han humphed as he activated his 7 kills subduing soul technique. His target was Fan Yong, yet a barrier of light unexpectedly materialized on his body, forcefully blocking his spiritual attack. Fan Yong roared with laughter and sneered. Ha ha! Young master bestowed me with this rare treasure that can defend against divine sense attacks. Moreover, it's a treasure that's been refined by a great elite at the heavenly body tier. You didn't expect this, did you? It was a pity that the divine sword was with Suishao right now, or he would have been able to cut Ling Han into two. This didn't matter though, as he and Luo Wu would definitely be able to blast Ling Han into the sea. Pun! The two of them attacked in unison, and sure enough, Ling Han was directly pushed off the wreckage of the ship. He fell into the sea with a plop. Ling Han! Shui Yenyu yelped in astonishment, and jumped into the sea after him. Stupid woman! Fan Yong couldn't help but curse upon seeing this. However, his expression was relatively dark. He knew how obsessed Zhao Luan was with this woman. Zhao Luan was determined to make her his wife once he advanced to the Sun-Moon tier. However, there was a 99% chance that Shui Yenyu would die in the sea now, so how were he and Zuishao supposed to explain this to Zhao Luan? He didn't have the spare time to mull over this thorny problem now, as the demonic snakes had already started to launch a new wave of ferocious attacks. Kill, 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 kill. Although there were few beings on both sides, they were all immortals at the mountain river tier, and they were all equivalent to bodies that gathered the essence of heaven and earth. The blood that they shed possessed overwhelming vitality and power, and the nearby seawater was all dyed a bloody red. This attracted countless weaker fish, but also attracted beings that were more powerful than them at the same time. A large flat fish appeared. Its 2 eyes were surprisingly located on only one side of its head. Its speed was incredibly quick, and it spread its jaws open as it surfaced from below the sea. At least a dozen giant snakes instantly disappeared into its mouth. It was a terrifying demonic beast at the Sun-Moon tier. Chapter 1016 Extreme Shamelessness. Chapter 1016 Extreme Shamelessness. A demonic beast at the Sun-Moon tier had appeared. Not only were the cultivators fleeing as quickly as they could, but even the nest of demonic snakes was also fleeing in all directions. The demonic snake king that had been extremely mighty and ferocious just then was like a mere eel before the gigantic fish. It became the gigantic fish's main target, and it was captured and disposed of in no time at all. It was crushed in the gigantic fish's maw, and then it was swallowed into its belly. The demonic snake king had been one step away from advancing into the Sun-Moon tier, yet it was this tiny distance that set it apart from a being that was genuinely at the Sun-Moon tier. It was unable to put up any true resistance before being eaten. The gigantic fish didn't seem satisfied, and it immediately swam toward the remaining survivors. It wasn't picky at all, and it ate demonic snakes and cultivators alike. After wreaking havoc and satisfying its craving, it swished its tail and disappeared into the depths of the sea. The situation truly changed a myriad of times in the blink of an eye. The demonic snakes had been enjoying a great advantage before. Under the demonic snake king's lead, it seemed as though they would be able to wipe out all of the cultivators. However, in the blink of an eye, a large majority of these demonic snakes had already disappeared into the gigantic fish's belly. Only less than 10 remained, and they posed absolutely no threat to anyone anymore. Still, the human cultivators didn't seem to have it any better either. The pirates had all been killed, Luo Yuan's Wuxiao had been killed, and only Lu Ying remained out of Sha Yuan's 4 loyal guards. The Yang clan had also suffered severe losses, with Yang Taiqing being the only surviving member of the ship's crew. In addition to him, Jin Zhihui, Fu Tian, and Yin Yuanxiang had also managed to survive. All in all, there were only 7 survivors left. They were all sitting on a piece of the ship's wreckage, and had already drifted extremely far away from where they had been battling just then. All of them wore solemn expressions. "Ha!" A look of surprise instantly appeared on Yang Taiqing's face as he looked behind him. This was because there was a piece of wreckage drifting toward them from the distance. Moreover, there were 2 people standing on top of it, Ling Han and Shui Yenyu. The others were also greatly astonished as they followed Yang Taiqing's gaze. Is this Ling Han an undying freak? Not only did he survive everyone's attacks on the ship, he even managed to pull through it unscathed. Afterward, he was targeted by a pirate elite, yet he still managed to live on just fine. Finally, he was blasted into the sea, where, logically speaking, he should have been attacked and ripped to shreds by the snakes. Yet, both he and Shui Yenyu appeared before them unscathed. How were they meant to accept this? Ling Han waved and said, "Hey, long time no see." He and Shui Yenyu paddled toward Yang Taiqing and the others. The others were all wounded to some extent, and it almost drove them crazy to see how relaxed Ling Han and Shui Yenyu were. Why do they seem like they're on a holiday? Contrary to the others, Yang Taiqing was fairly delighted to see that they were safe. "You managed to make it out unscathed? That's great!" Ling Han had killed a large number of demonic snakes just then, so he had somewhat avenged the deaths of many of the crewmen. Thus, Yang Taiqing's impression of Ling Han was much better than his impression of the others. A chilly look flashed across Ling Han's face as he swept his gaze across Luo Wu and Fan Yong. He had been blasted into the sea by these 2 people, and if it weren't for his black tower, it was very likely that he would have died. He was definitely going to kill these 2 people. "What are you looking at?" Luo Wu said coldly. Now that it had come to this, he couldn't be bothered hiding his animosity toward Ling Han any longer. After all, it was up in the air whether they could make it back to the shore alive at all. The main problem was that they were drifting along far too slowly. If they were unfortunate enough to come across some demonic beasts, there was a strong possibility that they would all lose their lives in this sea. In Luo Wu and Fan Yong's minds, this was all Ling Han's fault. If it wasn't because of him, why would they have come here in the first place? Of course, they would never reflect on their own actions. If they hadn't been hell-bent on killing Ling Han, would it ever have come to this? "I'm looking to see how you'll die," Ling Han replied icily. He used his body like a bow and his origin power as an arrow as he aimed his annihilating dragon star arrow at Luo Wu. A cold chill instantly gripped at Luo Wu's heart. There had been an elite at the Sun Moon tier leading him and Luo Yu, so killing Ling Han should have been an extremely easy task. However, Luo Xinyun had been unable to board the ship, and Luo Yu had suffered a wretched death, being eaten by the gigantic fish. Only he was left out of the initial group of 3. Now, Ling Han's arrow was pointing at him, yet he surprisingly lacked the confidence to defend himself facing this threat. A major reason for this was because the environment was extremely detrimental to his abilities. Otherwise, he would be able to unleash his movement techniques and completely evade Ling Han's aim. However, the flotsam they were on was only so big, so how could he evade? Jump into the sea? If he expended all of his energy and sunk to the bottom of the sea, there was a possibility that the seabed would be his eternal burial ground. Luo Wu was fairly quick-witted, and he immediately skirted behind Fu Tian's back. He was evidently using this youth as his shield. Fu Tian was infuriated. Like an enraged beast, he roared. "Fuck off! Don't worry, little friend. There's no hostility between you two, so he definitely won't shoot you." Of course, Luowu wouldn't give up so easily. If they were on land, he would be completely unafraid of Ling Han. However, he was on the back foot now, and there was also very little room for him to hide. Thus, he naturally wasn't willing to take any risks. Yang Taiching humphed and scolded. "Absolutely shameless!" He waved and grabbed with his right hand, placing Fu Tian behind himself and leaving Luowu in front of himself. Luowu's expression changed drastically. He had become an easy target again. "Captain Yang, I paid you a fee to board, so you have to ensure my safety," Luowu shouted hurriedly. "We've already been shipwrecked, so my responsibilities have also become void," Yang Taiching said coldly. "I'll naturally refund and compensate everyone when we make it back to the harbor." "Wrong, wrong, wrong!" Luowu pointed at his feet as he shook his head, and said, "Look, Captain, we're still on the ship. Even if it's only a fragment, it's still a part of the ship. You're still the captain, so you're obligated to ensure your passengers' safety." He was indeed a shameless person, yet his words did hold some truth. Moreover, Yang Taiching was a sucker for righteousness, and his expression instantly became hesitant. "Ling Han, don't attack him," Yang Taiching said. He blocked Luowu behind him. "Ha ha!" Luowu chortled loudly, appearing extremely smug. There was Yang Taiching to protect him on the ship, and once they made it out of this situation, there would be no need for him to be afraid of Ling Han anymore. Yang Taiching suddenly turned around and grabbed Luowu by the neck. He was an entire minor level above Luowu, and he also had a battle prowess of 2 stars, even though the effects of his secret technique had already disappeared. So, how could Luowu block his sudden strike? Luowu's smug laughter was instantly caught in his throat. As his neck was being gripped tightly, his face was rapidly becoming beet red. Although cultivators could stay alive without breathing, the circulation of their origin power would also be cut if their necks were to be locked in a tight grip. If they were trapped in such a situation for too long, their spirit would still end up dying. Luowu flailed about as he tried to escape from Yang Taiching's stranglehold. However, this was to no avail, and he only felt more and more unwell. "Although I won't allow Ling Han to kill you, I won't gloss over the fact that you two purposefully blasted him into the sea either." Yang Taiching reached out and lifted Fan Yong by the neck as well. The two of them squirmed violently, yet neither of them was a match for Yang Taiching. They could only flail about helplessly. "Humph! When we disembark this ship, I'll personally deal with you two first," Yang Taiching said coldly. He forcefully flung his arms outward. "Pa!" Luowu and Fan Yong were both dripping with cold sweat as their bottoms plunked onto the wreckage. They felt as if they had walked to death's doors and back. Their heads remained lowered as all kinds of cruel thoughts flashed through their minds. Chapter 1017 Wanting to Forge the Strongest Sword. Chapter 1017 Wanting to Forge the Strongest Sword. The 2 broken pieces of the ship were now like 2 small rafts, bearing the fortunate survivors as they floated on the huge sea. They were trying hard to return to the marine roots of the Yang clan. Then, only 3 days would be needed, at most, and they would meet with another ship from the Yang clan and be saved. However, they had survived a great disaster, yet they did not meet their good fortune one. Not long after, they encountered a stormy sea that turned them all dizzy and caused them to lose any sense of direction. When it was calm again, Yang Taiching took out his compass for a look, and discovered that they were extremely far away from the normal marine routes. There was nothing else that could be done. They could only row as much as possible to return to their original marine route. Thankfully, all of them were elites of immortal level, and thus there was no need to worry about problems like food and water. Soon night fell. Everyone took their turns to rest, but none of them dared to be too relaxed, because everyone was trying to outwit everybody else, so who would really be trustworthy among them? At dawn, a red sun leaped out of the horizon, incredibly magnificent. There There seems to be a ship. A black dot appeared ahead of them. Everyone focused their gazes and looked in one direction, and there indeed was something floating on the surface of the sea. Be careful, it could be pirates! Yang Taiching exclaimed. This place was completely distanced from the marine routes of the Yang clan's fleet. The ships belonging to the Yang clan would definitely not appear here unless by complete accident. Hence, the possibility that it was a pirate ship was extremely high. That's not right! Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth, and shook his head. He said, That's not a ship. Instead, it's an island. The reason why it looked like a ship was because this island was too far away from them. An island! Everyone felt invigorated. If they got on the island, they would be able to reorganize. At least, they could make a few real oars, or they could even create a sail. It would be better than now, at least. They rowed once more to advance. After quite a long while of rowing, that island was also becoming gradually bigger in front of their eyes, and finally, they could see it clearly. That was indeed an island, and it was a very big one. This stunned quite a few of them. How could Ling Han's sight be so good? Another long while passed, and they finally landed on the beach. We'll move separately. One day later, we will gather back here. We will collect all materials that can be used, Yang Taiching said. He stored away the 2 broken pieces of his ship to prevent anyone from leaving by themselves and leaving everyone else on the island. Ability-wise, he was the strongest. He was also the captain, so naturally, he would be the one calling the shots. Furthermore, he was more trustworthy. Otherwise, it didn't matter who got a hold of these 2 boats, for the others would not be at ease. Luo Wu and Fan Yong exchanged a look. After their shared trial, they had formed an alliance. Now that everyone was moving separately, they naturally had their eye on Ling Han. Unfortunately, Yang Taiching chose to go with Ling Han, which caused the duo's plan to tail and kill him secretly to completely fizzle out. Actually, Ling Han was feeling a bit sorry too. He still had the Crimson Ground locking net which he had not used yet, so even against a cultivator in the high extreme, he would be unafraid. Moreover, he could stun his opponent with the 7 kills subduing soul technique, and draw them into the Black Tower, so he was assured of victory against any cultivator in the high extreme. This island was very big, and had a narrow, elongated shape. They were now at about 1/3 of the island. Hence, they separated into 2 groups. One group would head east, while the other group would head west. The island was covered with dense jungle, and each tree was at least 300 meters tall, with huge leaves. Hence, if one were to walk underneath the trees, there was practically no light that could penetrate the canopy, making it appear extremely spooky. Ling Han's group had 6 people. Aside from himself and Shui Yanyu, there was also Yang Taiching, Yin Yuanxiang, Fu Tian, and Jin Zhihui. Very obviously, Yang Taiching had separated Ling Han from his enemies. Brother Jin, you keep holding onto a sword, don't you feel tired? Ling Han asked the young man who was hugging his sword after they had set out. Jin Zhihui shook his head, and replied, Only when I experience the feelings of the sword at all times would I be able to forge an excellent sword. Was he a sword maniac? Shui Yanyu suddenly twitched slightly, and asked, Could it be Brother Jin comes from the sword-forged manor? If it was another man, being the focus of attention from a seductive beauty like Shui Yanyu, he would probably be completely dizzy with ecstasy. However, Jin Zhihui did not have the slightest bit of reaction. He merely hugged his sword as if it was his true love. Indeed, I do come from the sword-forged manor, he answered with a nod, appearing not to have the slightest bit of subtlety. As expected, Shui Yanyu nodded. All members of the sword-forged manor had the surname Jin. What sword-forged manor? Ling Han asked. The sword-forged manor is the most acclaimed holy land of weaponsmiths on the Joint Peace planet. However, this manor only forges swords, and does not forge any other types of weapons. The blades they forge are not only sharp and sturdy, quite a number of them also has their own unique attributes. Shui Yanyu explained. Every swordsman would be proud of having a sword from the sword-forged manor. So awesome? Ling Han couldn't help but smile and ask. Brother Jean, if I obtain the materials in the future, can I ask you to forge my sword? Yang Taiching couldn't help but shake his head. He had naturally heard of the sword forge manor, and also knew that the people from this manor were very strange. They were obviously famous all over the world, yet did not care the slightest bit about money or power. They were too busy forging their swords. However, though they enjoyed forging swords, it was up to their mood whom they would be willing to forge a sword for. Some had paid astronomical amounts, and it was still useless, whereas some people needed not pay a single cent and would be gifted a sword of their own. Since Ling Han had spoken so rashly like this, he was probably going to meet with a merciless refusal from Jin Zhihui. Okay, Jin Zhihui said, nodding without hesitation. Pooh! Yang Taiching almost choked. Wasn't it said that everyone from the sword forge manor had weird temperaments? How could he have agreed so easily? Jin Zhihui scratched his head and said a bit shyly, However, I have not forged a single sword yet. Fuck. No wonder he had agreed so readily. He should only be an apprentice. Yet Ling Han laughed loudly, and clapped a hand on his shoulder, and said, Then, it's decided. In the future, my sword will be up to you. Are you not afraid I will waste your materials? Jin Zhihui asked in surprise. When others heard him say this, they were likely to shake their heads directly. Even those who gave him some face would change the topic and no longer speak of the matter of forging a sword. Ling Han said, With what you said earlier about wanting to experience the feelings of a sword, I am certain you can forge an excellent, supreme sword. Jin Zhihui couldn't help but feel excited. Even in the sword forge manor, he had never gotten the approval of a single person. Even his father merely advised him not to daydream. Only this man in front of him approved of it. Most importantly, though his idea of experiencing the feelings of a sword was something he'd said himself, hearing it from Ling Han's mouth gave him the feeling like he had encountered an intimate friend. All right. In the future, I will definitely forge a supreme sword for you. He clenched his fists, his eyes shining. Previously he had spoken little, but now it seemed like his vocal box had been opened. He thought of Ling Han as an intimate friend, and spoke endlessly. Brother Ling, I want to forge the strongest sword in this world, he exclaimed. Chapter 10:18 Giant Pit. Chapter 10:18 Giant Pit. The strongest sword? Ling Han was surprised. This was not something to be said easily. Did the strongest exist in this world? There would always be a mountain taller than the last. There was only talk of a stronger existence, so where would this strongest sword come from? Yang Taiching and the others shook their heads as well. The talk of the strongest should only be the naive thoughts of a child. The strongest sword! Jin Zhihui shook his head continuously. I will definitely forge the strongest sword. How? Ling Han was very intrigued. Jin Zhihui's whole head was filled with forging swords, and now that he thought of Ling Han as an intimate friend, he would naturally not mind sharing a secret with him. He thus said, I am studying a kind of material. If I can successfully refine it, there is hope of forging the strongest sword. Pooh! Yang Taiching and the others were all disdainful. What material would be that awesome? If there really was this kind of material, what would be left for you to study? It would have long since been snatched away by others. Yet Jin Zhihui did not spare these people a look. Instead, he minded his own business and said, This is a king of materials that has endless possibilities of improvement. You see, when we forge a sword, no matter how much effort we expend, it would still be limited by the material that it is forged from. True. Ling Han nodded. You could not possibly forge a piece of level 1 godly metal into a level 2 god tool, as the material itself determined that it was impossible. However, if I could extract that kind of material, that kind of essence, and forge it into a weapon, it would be able to automatically swallow other materials or god tools. From level 1 to level 2, from level 2 to level 3, there would be endless room for improvement. Jin Zhihui explained excitedly. Instantly, the eyes of Yang Taiching and the others all widened. Even their mouths were about to fly open, they were that dumbstruck. A god tool that had endless room for improvement? putting aside actually making it reality, the mere thought of it was enough to chill the spine. Would any other person think of this kind of fantastical story? If a god tool like that really appeared, the whole world would experience a revolution because of it. Ling Han was also stunned. Then, he put his hand on Jin Jihui's shoulder heavily. "Brother Jin, you are definitely a genius without compare." Jin Jihui looked absolutely touched. When he related this theory to his clansmen, even when his father heard it, all he received was mockery and ridicule. Even his father, who had the highest opinion of him, advised him to give up such an unrealistic idea. "Brother Ling, do you believe I can forge that kind of sword?" he asked. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "If you don't try, then there really won't be the slightest bit of possibility. But if you work at it, then even if there was only a 1 in a million chance of success, there is still at least a sliver of hope." "Yes. Yes. Yes." Jin Jihui continued to nod his head. Ling Han's words had really touched his heart, causing him to feel as if he had met an intimate friend, and he wanted nothing more than to completely devote himself to Ling Han. Meanwhile, Yang Taiching and the others lost interest. The strongest sword sounded very awesome, but no matter how they thought about it, it was an impossible endeavor. "Brother Ling, after I forge this divine sword, I will send it to you," Jin Jihui said. He loved forging swords, but was no swordsman himself. In truth, all the members of the Swordforge Manor were outstanding masters of the hammer because they needed to wave their hammers endlessly when they were forging weapons. On the other hand, they were not accustomed to using swords. "Then I'll be waiting," Ling Han said with a smile. Jin Jihui nodded seriously. Because he had met with a bottleneck, he wanted to travel around to improve his mood and seek some inspiration. The deathly battles these few days had given him quite a bit of comprehension. However, though he had no worldly experience, he was no idiot himself. Hence, he did not speak out any bit about this fact. He had made his decision. After he returned, he would cultivate in seclusion, and after he came out of seclusion, who knew, he might have solved all the problems plaguing him, and he would be able to forge the strongest divine sword in history. The group of 6 walked in the dark jungle. However, all of a sudden, a wide space appeared ahead of them, revealing the blinding sunlight, and the 6 people gaped at the same time due to their intense shock. Ahead of them, there actually appeared an incomparably massive deep pit. This pit was overwhelmingly huge. It occupied about 1/3 of the island, and its incredible depth was unfathomable. The walls of the pit were completely steep, without the slightest bit of foothold, as smooth as a mirror. It was like a pillar that connected to the heavens had stabbed this place, and left behind such a hollow between heaven and earth. This was too sudden. Just 1 step ago, they had still been in the jungle, but in the space of a single step, the jungle had disappeared, and this kind of steep cliff had appeared. If they had not been careful, they would have directly taken the wrong step and fallen in. It should be known that the gravity in this region was frighteningly huge, and there was no use for flight god tools. If one actually fell into this kind of deep pit, then it was really unknown whether he would be able to ever come out again. It was not that scary out at sea, because the gradient out at sea was relatively gentle. One would only need to travel in a specific direction, and there would come a day when he would be able to reach shore. But here? If one fell in, there was a high possibility that he would never come out again. They all stretched out their heads and looked down from the edge of the steep cliff, and could only see that the bottom was an unfathomably deep darkness, just as if it could reach the core of the joint peace planet. If that was true, then even an elite of the heavenly body tier would die if he fell in. The divine flame inside the planet was definitely capable of turning even an elite of the heavenly body tier to ashes. When they stretched out their heads to look, they were still affected by gravity. They quickly retreated back to safety. If they lost balance and fell in, they would be done for. "Lord Yang, have you heard of this island?" Ling Han asked. Yang Taiching looked completely astonished. He shook his head slowly and answered, "Apologies. Although the Yang clan is known as the overlord of the Star Sea, I did not know that such an island existed." Sure enough, even the Yang clan did not know. All of them were silent. All of a sudden, this island was shrouded in a veil of mystery, and though the mystery would cause one to feel curiosity, at the same time, it also symbolized unknown dangers. Ling Han chopped down a huge tree, and then threw it into the deep pit. Shio, the huge tree fell down, and very soon became a little black dot. Then, it was swallowed by the darkness inside the deep pit, and there was soon no sign of it. There was no sound of impact to be heard even after a very long time. "The bottom is not connected with the sea," Ling Han said. Everyone nodded. Though they had climbed some slopes along their way on this island, the sea level was definitely not that low. They should have long since heard the sound of the trees splashing into the sea. If it was connected with the sea, then they would only need to enter and explore. They would still be able to find a water channel that connected to the sea, and then find some way to go ashore. But the current situation was that this pit was very possibly tens of thousands of meters deep. That was too frightening. Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth, but it was of no use. He still could not see to the bottom. "Huh!" Yang Taiching was the first to look guarded. Very quickly, Ling Han and the others went on the alert as well, and looked towards their left. Voila! 3 people suddenly walked out of the dense jungle. It was not Luo Wu, Fan Yong, and Luing, but rather 3 young men. They were seated respectively on a tiger, wolf, and panther. However, upon another look, one would realize that these 3 fierce beasts were not real animals. Instead, they were forged from metal, and could not really be considered all that full of life. One only need to take a closer look, and would realize that they were not real animals. "Puppeteers!" Yang Taiching and the others exclaimed simultaneously. Chapter 1019 Earth's Core Island. Chapter 1019 Earth's Core Island. In the immortal realm, there were various kinds of cultivators with special abilities. The most commonly seen, and possessing the highest status, were naturally alchemists. That was because if you did not have a weapon, you could still buy a piece of godly metal, and no matter how much you tormented it, you would still be able to forge a usable weapon with it. Then, with constant use over a long time, your own martial intent would be instilled in this weapon. In fact, it could completely be used like a god tool itself. Furthermore, it would be a god tool that only belonged to you. In the immortal realm, the definition of a god tool was a weapon that anyone could activate, possessing power on the immortal level. Thus, the difference between a weapon that one had personally nurtured and a god tool was that one could only be used by yourself, and would only be a piece of trash in anyone else's hands, whereas the other could be used in anyone's hands as long as they possessed enough power to activate it. We're getting off topic. Weaponsmiths naturally belong to the category of cultivators with special abilities. They could engrave unique formation patterns on weapons, as well as other complicated objects, so that the weapons would have great power like cultivators themselves. Because of that, weaponsmiths did not have a low status either. Every cultivator would desire a weapon that they were better at using. Besides, weaponsmiths could also create armor. With the increase in defenses, one would only have endless possibilities brought by being alive, after all. Aside from them, there were also formation masters. The great formation of the imperial capital, for example, was created by a formation grandmaster. Their status was extremely high in the Joint Peace Planet. Even the 3 great emperors would be very respectful when in their presence. Next was a group of cultivators with special abilities that belonged to a very rarely seen group, such as diviners, astrologers, and puppeteers. Puppeteers could make an inanimate object look like it was alive. In the imperial capital, the creations of puppeteers could also be seen, such as a very small number of horse-drawn carriages, wherein the horsepower were not demonic beasts, but rather puppets. Those comprised of weaponsmithing, formation techniques, and there was even some alchemy in the mix, which made it extremely complicated. Hence, there were pitifully few puppeteers. Those puppet-drawn carriages in the imperial capital were not produced in this era, but rather merely remnants from who knew how long ago. Thus, when they saw 3 people mounting puppets suddenly appear on the island, Yang Taiching and the others were naturally astonished. This was a deserted island, and furthermore, there was a shockingly colossal pit here. Now, even puppeteers had appeared. This was really too bizarre. Ha ha ha, I never thought that guests would come to this island, the young man on the lion said. We sensed some movement previously, and thought that something had gone wrong with the mechanical birds. We never imagined that there would actually really be guests. Yang Taiching, as the ship captain, was naturally unwilling to delegate his responsibility to others. With clasped hands, he said, "We have encountered a storm, and drifted here. May I ask what exactly this place is?" "This is Earth's core island," the young man on the tiger replied, smiling. He pointed at the deep pit on the side. "We call this Earth's core cave, and apparently it can reach the core of the planet." "Oh, right. I am Guixuan, and these two are my junior brothers, Ning Tai and Tong Yulong." "Greetings, everyone." Ning Tai and Tong Yulong both clasped their hands in greeting. Ling Han and the others gave their names as well, introducing themselves. "So you have encountered the attack of a demonic beast, which crashed into your ship, and that is why you have floated here." Guixuan nodded, and continued, "This island is a place for living in seclusion, and the people on the island have no intention to barge into the outside island. Instead, men would farm, whereas women weave as we enjoy a life of peace. Everyone, please come to rest at our village first. We'll see if we can build a ship for you all and send you off." Ning Tai continued, "However, we are already accustomed to peace, so we request you all to keep the location of this island a secret and not leak it out, leading to the destruction of our peaceful lives." Tong Yulong continued. Yang Taiching and the others nodded in response. "We still have 3 companions." Though Yang Taiching was not fond of Luo Wu and Fan Yong, as the ship's captain, he was still responsible. "Understood. We still have 2 of our junior brothers who have headed over. You can meet them at the village," Guixuan said, smiling. Yang Taiching nodded. "Everyone, please come with us." Guixuan moved the tiger he was riding on, and slowly headed downhill. They all followed behind him, and after walking for about an hour, they finally passed through the dense jungle. A valley appeared ahead of them. The sides of the valley were steep, with mountains in all directions, and there was only a very narrow and small entrance. 1 man guarded the pass, and even 10,000 wouldn't be able to break through. This thought flashed past in Ling Han's head. As long as a single elite was here as overseer, then even if there was an army outside, they would not be able to enter. However, at the same time, as long as there was an elite blocking the way here, the people inside would not be able to come out as well. The entrance was not guarded. Instead, there were only 2 stone statues. One was an 8-legged spider, whereas the other was a large bird whose wings were stretched out. One could see how robust its claws were, as they were even wider than a human arm. They entered into the valley, and instantly, the valley became wide, revealing a beautiful picture. This place had multiple farms, which formed a circular pattern, and in the middle, there was a very, very large village. The bridges, flowing water, and houses were filled with the beauty of the countryside. Seeing this scene so abruptly would cause one to forget the cruelty of battle and the bloody reek of power, and only feel at ease and absolved of worries. "This is a really good place," Yang Taiching said sincerely. "Would I be able to enjoy my retirement here in future?" Guixuan laughed, and replied, "If Brother Yang decides to live in seclusion, why not? However, I have to remind you all, please forget your identities as cultivators after coming here. We strictly forbid fighting here, and no matter if you are in the Heavenly Body tier or in the Shattering Void tier, in this place, you would only be a farmer or a weaver." Everyone nodded. Every place had its own rules. A powerful dragon couldn't defeat a snake in its nest one, what more when they were freeloaders. In the farms they could see people guiding cows as they plowed the land, and there were some transplanting rice seedlings as well, looking busy yet relaxed. They walked on the small path between the farms, and entered into the village. There were a few scattered people walking on the streets. The majority stayed indoors, with some watering their plants, and some sunbathing. There was also smoke rising from cooking, with the whole place appearing incredibly peaceful and serene. The people here are fond of quiet, so I would ask all of you not to disturb others. After everyone came here, they have forgotten who they previously were. Guixiuan reminded once more. After walking some more, they came to the center of the village. There was a manor that occupied a large area. It was about the size of a third of the whole village, and was surrounded by walls. The main doors were open, and a huge courtyard appeared as soon as they entered. Limestone tiles were laid out there, making it appear a bit like a martial training court, though not one person was training. Everyone, I will first make arrangements for your accommodations. My master is fond of creating various rare, unusual objects, and every time he embarks on a project, it could take him quite a number of days. Thus, you may have to wait for a good number of days to be able to see him. Guixiuan said apologetically. Everyone said they did not mind. If they did not get help, they would be drifting for who knew how many days in the large, empty sea before finally being able to return to the marine roots of the Yang clan. Hence, they would not mind waiting a few days here. Guixiuan led them to the eastern part of the manor. There was a large number of small courtyards here, and he allocated them to everyone respectively. After all the arrangements were done, Luo Wu, Fan Yong, and Lu Ying were also led here by 2 young men. Those 2 young men were Guixiuan's junior brothers. One was called Shui De, and the other was called Bu Jingyun. Ling Han and Shui Yanyu stayed in one of the courtyards. Anyways, with the Black Tower, they did not care about the condition of their accommodations. At this time, the sky had darkened as well. Extremely strange, Ling Han said. Chapter 10:20 Strangeness. Chapter 10:20 Strangeness. What's so strange? Shui Yanyu drew out a bamboo chair and sat down as she enjoyed this astonishing serenity. There was the sound of wind and leaves, peace, and serenity here, causing her to forget the disputes of the outside world. I say, wife, have you stayed so long in the imperial capital that you have become dumb? Ling Han asked, grinning. I don't want to speak with a damn pervert. Shui Yanyu closed her eyes, looking like she was about to take a catnap. Ling Han snickered, walked over, and picked her up off her seat. Then, he sat down himself, held her in his arms, and began exploring the secluded, beautiful scenery of her body without any reservations. Woo! Shui Yanyu released a moan in embarrassment. This guy was really too bad. Now, her weaknesses had already been gripped tightly in his hands, and he could instantly cause her will to crumble, causing her to sink into that captivating yet embarrassing *** sensation. Wife, this place of yours seems to have become bigger, Ling Han said quietly by her ear. Would that be my credit? Shui Yanyu rolled her eyes angrily at him. Wasn't it because he was fond of playing around with that place? And he dared call it a credit? Pay, damn pervert. Remove your dirty hand. She made a pretense of aloofness. How could Ling Han be willing to retreat? Now that he had occupied those 2 high peaks, he still continued to switch from one to another, intending to divide his attention equally and treat them both the same to avoid one being bigger than the other, affecting the aesthetic quality of it. Every time he said that, it would naturally result in Shui Yanyu rolling her eyes at him as she used her fists to punch him. Wife, have you really not found anything strange about this place? Ling Han kissed her slender snow-white nape. A hint of fragrance entered his nostrils, her snowy skin smooth and glowing. Whether it was the touch of his hands, or his lips, it was indescribably wonderful. Shui Yanyu only felt her whole body had gone completely soft as she groaned miserably in her heart. Repeatedly, this damn pervert would take liberties with her. How much longer would she be able to maintain her reservedness? She was probably about to raise her white flag in surrender, and take the initiative to share a night of pleasure with this damn pervert, wasn't she? With you doing this to me, how would I be able to think properly? She asked in annoyance. Ling Han couldn't help but feel his heart flutter, and said, The word doing is really well said. It made me suddenly want to further discuss the meaning of life with you. Damn pervert! It was apparent that Shui Yanyu's art of insulting others had not improved much. It had only increased from 1 word to 2 words, but the main style was practically unchanged. Ling Han laughed loudly. You have stayed too long in the imperial capital, so you do not know how dangerous the outside world could be. True, The imperial capital is filled more with power struggles than anything else, and you would not be qualified to be drawn into such disputes, either. You speak as if you understand everything. Shui Yenyu quickly grabbed Ling Han's hand. This guy actually wanted to untie her robes. He was really too perverted. Ling Han squeezed her peak slightly, and easily crumbled the resistance of this seductive beauty. He admired Shui Yenyu's beautiful, naked body. It was as white as jade, but also seemed to be carved out of ivory, beautiful without equal. Wife, don't you think that this place is too strangely quiet? What's so strange about it? Shui Yenyu practically moaned. As a breeze blew past, her hair waved slightly, and her jade-like skin reflected a magnificent glow under the moonlight, captivating the heart and soul. From the moment we entered the village, not one person spared another look at us, Ling Han said. Didn't they already explain? After coming here, everyone has left behind their previous identities, and only wishes to enjoy a life of peace. Shui Yenyu, on the other hand, did not find anything out about that. Ling Han smiled and said, It is one thing to enjoy a life of peace, but if a group of strangers suddenly appeared in your home, at the very least you would pay some attention to it. You would definitely not ignore them altogether. Shui Yenyu was slightly stunned, her beautiful eyes suddenly snapping open. Yet she discovered that her upper body was completely bare. That damn pervert was currently admiring the curves of her body, her high peaks and deep valley. Immediately, she flushed in embarrassment, and quickly pulled her clothing over to cover herself up. Yet how could such beautiful scenery be covered? Instead, her half-covered image increased the temptation she posed, causing Ling Han to swallow repeatedly. He suddenly had the urge to carry this seductive beauty into the house and begin his conquest. However, Shui Yenyu currently was just a bit embarrassed. After all, now that Ling Han had taken advantage of her so many times, she was slightly used to it as well. She said, It is indeed a bit odd. Furthermore, Ling Han continued with a serious face. Have you discovered that there is not one child in this village? I have looked over, and this place has not only elderly. There is a considerable number of young people too. Leaving behind their battles and aggression did not mean that they would leave behind even that as well. Just think about it, if we farm in the day, besides having fun at night, what else could be done here? Shui Yenyu's small mouth gaped. She had indeed been shocked. This guy's previous words had caused a bit of a chill to race up her spine, but why had he suddenly jumped onto that topic? What kind of logical thought process did he have? True enough, he was a pervert by nature, and she had not addressed him wrongly. But when she thought further, she felt that Ling Han's words were very logical. It was a peaceful village, but why were there no children? In the real countryside, it should be young people working in the field while the elderly were sitting in the courtyards, and the children would be playing around in the village. Damn pervert, can you stop moving around? You're touching so much that I can't think properly. Shui Yenyu could not help but exclaim in annoyance. This guy's large hands had been wreaking havoc on her breasts all this while, causing her to feel flustered. I swear by my conscience, I merely want this pair of sisters to grow bigger quickly, Ling Han declared seriously as he gripped her breasts. As shameless. Shui Yenyu was about to pass out. How did she end up with such an undependable man? Ling Han laughed, and finally retreated as he said, Then we'll wait until night when it's all quiet. Even if I die, I will not let you have your way. Shui Yenyu had gotten a scare, thinking that this guy had finally lost his patience and was planning to devour her. In truth, she actually was prepared for that kind of thing to happen, but she was a woman, after all. No matter what, she had to be reserved. Ling Han was startled, and shook his head as he said, You asterisk, what is your head filled with? I was saying, when it's night and quiet, we'll go out to take a look around, and see what's going on. Shui Yenyu finally realized that she had misunderstood Ling Han, and couldn't help but blush furiously. However, when she saw the mischievous grin on Ling Han's face, she knew that this guy had definitely baited her into it. She couldn't help but stretch out her hand and pinch heavily the soft flesh at Ling Han's waist. You damn pervert! The couple was lovey-dovey for a little while longer, and finally stood up reluctantly. After tidying up their attire, they quietly walked out the doors. Where are the both of you heading at such a late hour? They had just exited their side courtyard when they saw Shui De come out of the shadows, riding a white elephant. This white elephant was naturally a puppet as well. It was 6 meters tall, and as its trunk waved around, one would find it difficult to distinguish if it was a real elephant in the darkness. The scenery here is so beautiful and quiet, so we wanted to take a walk. Ling Han answered. The people here are fond of quiet, particularly at night. It would not be nice to disturb the others when they rest. Shui De shook his head. The two of you had better return quickly to rest as well. Shui Yinyu's hand shook slightly, and she was just about to draw out her divine sword, yet Ling Han stretched out an arm to curl around her slender waist, and his hand tightened its grip. She had already developed a kind of tacit understanding with Ling Han, and knew the latter was signaling her to be patient. All right, we will go back, Ling Han said with a smile, and shook his head slightly at Shui Yenyu. Chapter 1021 Island Master Pei Ji. Chapter 1021 Island Master Pei Ji. It's strange, and too suspicious, Shui Yenyu declared immediately when they had returned to their own courtyard. Ling Han nodded, and exclaimed, My wife is brilliant! Shui Yenyu rolled her eyes at him in annoyance, and asked, You are showing off your foresight, aren't you? All my achievements are inevitably linked to the teachings of my wife, you. Aren't you my teacher? Ling Han asked, smiling. Shui Yenyu's beautiful face involuntarily flushed. She had indeed been Ling Han's teacher for a while, and in the end, Ling Han was close to dragging her into bed by now. Though the two of them were not master and disciple, but rather teacher and student, the mere thought of it still caused her much embarrassment. That Shui De obviously did not want us to go and investigate. According to him, the people here are accustomed to resting early, so how could he possibly be standing guard there at such a late hour at night otherwise? He is obviously monitoring us. Ling Han nodded and said, Unfortunately, I am, by nature, a curious person. The more you do not want me to know, the more I want to find out. This time, Shui Yenyu was supportive of Ling Han, and asked, Then will we be sneaking out again later? No, we're sleeping, Ling Han answered with a grin. Shui Yenyu was about to be driven mad. Have you begun your huge skips in logical thought process again? Ling Han kissed her and replied, On this first day, it is both the time when our curiosity is the strongest, as well as the time when the other side is the most guarded. I think the 5 people on the island should be guarding us. Unless we plan to completely become hostile with them immediately, we could not possibly leave tonight. Tomorrow, then? Shui Yenyu asked. We'll play it by ear, Ling Han answered seriously. This valley was easy to guard, but difficult to assault. There was only a single way of entry and exit, and it was a naturally formed place of danger. Since they had already taken the initiative to enter into this trap, they definitely could not be rash or reckless. And Shui Yenyu nodded. She was gradually leaning more and more towards having Ling Han make the decisions and take the lead in matters. Just in case, they still entered into the Black Tower. Shui Yenyu began cultivating, whereas Ling Han continued to concoct his heavenly pearl pill. He definitely had to finish concocting this alchemical pill as soon as possible. Not only would it speed up the advancement of his cultivation level, it would also bring him a high income. Cultivation was naturally inseparable from money to support it. At the beginning, it had been gold and silver, followed by origin crystals, and now, it had become true origin stones, but in essence, they were the same. As the night passed, Ling Han revealed a smile of satisfaction. He was getting closer and closer to success. The couple exited the Black Tower, and they walked out of their courtyard after having their breakfast. In the case of Yang Taiching and the others, some had had a good night's sleep, and appeared to be energetic and awake. Others, though, were still looking weary. It was obvious that they had not slept very well the night before. After all, those like Yang Taiching, Fan Yong, and the others, who had had a wealth of experience of journeying outside, knew the dangers of the world, and would definitely not trust anyone so easily. In contrast, Jin Zhihui and the others lacked that kind of alertness in this area, and slept very soundly the night before. They gathered again. Luo Wu and Fan Yong made no attempt to conceal their killing intent towards Ling Han. However, they were now freeloaders, and added with the fact that Yang Taiching was here, they did not dare make a move on Ling Han. Everyone, it is really a coincidence. My master just happened to come out of seclusion today, and wishes to see you all. Guixiuan walked over. Naturally, he was still riding on that puppet tiger, just as if he had no idea how to walk without that toy. However, on the other hand, puppets could be considered god tools that could awaken themselves. Since he was riding around on a puppet all day, was he also carefully guarding against them? Then we must definitely visit Lord Island Master, they all replied, smiling. Master is a very brilliant puppeteer, and is skilled at creating various rare and unusual objects. With Master's help, we will definitely be able to create an excellent, well-built ship which will safely allow you to leave here, Guixiuan said. These words immediately moved their hearts. None of them had any plans of living in seclusion in the woods. With Guixiuan leading the way, they arrived at the main hall of the manor. It was really a great hall. It was over 30 meters wide, and as tall as 15 meters, just like a palace. In the innermost part of the main hall, an old man was seated. He should be the master of Guixiuan and his junior brothers. The old man had a very tall build. Even if he was seated, he was as tall as an ordinary man who was standing. He could practically match Yang Taiching's size. I am Pei Ji. The old man did not stand up, and merely nodded at them. Then, smiling, he said, I am not being rude here. I have long since lost my legs, so I cannot stand. He lifted his long robes. True enough, the part of his legs beneath the knee was gone, and thinking back on his words, they should have been chopped off by another, or perhaps some accident had happened to cause his handicap. He was not born a cripple. It's all right, it's fine. Everyone quickly shook their heads. Pei Ji said, I already know what you have gone through. I just so happen to have some materials on hand, so I will spend a few days' time to build a small ship for all of you. It will take me 5 days at minimum, and 10 days at most. After I am done, I will inform you. In these few days' time, you can all take a good rest and enjoy a life of peace. Thank you, Lord Island Master. They were all very glad. He was a puppeteer, so he would definitely have a pair of skillful hands. Pei Ji nodded. If you are interested in the process of puppet construction, you may chat with my disciples. I, too, hope that this art could be developed and promoted to allow more people to learn it. When these words were said, everyone was pleasantly surprised. Puppetry and ultimate martial arts techniques were the same, and belonged to the category of secret treasures. However, Pei Ji was actually willing to share his knowledge. His generosity was really astonishing. Even Shui Yenyu was wavering slightly. Had she and Ling Han been overly suspicious? How could this kind of person be a villain? Pei Ji chatted with them for a while longer, but it was all pointless conventional talk. Soon, he expressed that he did not want to waste any more time, and wanted to begin building the ship. Everyone was naturally pleased. The faster he got started, the better it would be, so they naturally all excused themselves. Everyone, if you are interested in the construction of puppets, you may come seek out myself and my brother disciples. We will take turns to discuss with you all, and as long as you have talent, we will definitely not keep our skill to ourselves, Guixiuan said, smiling. Everyone was greatly interested, and indicated that they would be paying them a visit. Ling Han, on the other hand, was not greedy. He was cultivating both alchemy and martial arts, and following 2 paths at the same time was enough to make him feel strained. What more when another art of puppetry would be tossed into the mix? Moreover, he was a firm believer in his own strength. No matter how strong puppets were, they were still external objects, unlike alchemy, wherein the alchemical pills he concocted could at least be used to strengthen himself. Shui Yenyu, though, wanted to take a look and see if she had talent in this area. However, she was soon dissuaded by Ling Han. He had not dismissed his worries just because of this, so to avoid any accidents, It was best if the two of them did not separate. He pulled Shui Yanyu with him out of the manor. By now, they would not have any reason to keep detaining him in the manor, right? Brother Ling and Miss Shui wished to go out. When they came to the doors of the manor, they saw Bu Jingyun approach them, riding on a black ape. That made Ling Han even begin to suspect whether these people lost their legs as well, just like Pei Ji. Otherwise, why would they be riding on puppets all day long? That's right. We're going out for a walk since it's so rare to see such beautiful scenery, Ling Han answered, smiling. Hee, then let me accompany you both. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.